with meeting number 8 of the SAG, or SAG. Few housekeeping items, as always. The most important, if you haven't gotten your parking validated, please do it now. We will stop the meeting and allow it to happen. I heard someone was in there for a full 2 weeks last time, trapped. And then also for members of the public, we do have Spanish translation available in the back for you. So as we move forward in this meeting, kind of a jam-packed agenda and kind of an interactive exercise where we're going to spend 99% of our time together, and Dave and Matt will walk us through that exercise together. So I apologize for them in advance. We need to oppose 2 different sets of meeting minutes, which are in front of you. As you remember, we had a bit of just a technical posting error last meeting, so we were unable to approve the July 9th meeting minutes. So I need a motion and a second to approve the July 9th meeting minutes. Kathy and Leslie, thank you. Any opposed? Okay, all in favor, let's move forward. Same for the August 13th, our last meeting. Motion to approve, Kathy, Kevin. All right, great, you guys are quick tonight. All right, so both meeting minutes approved with no opposition. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dave, and I will see you guys at the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Lee. Great to see you all again here tonight. Usual protocol, I'm going to run you through the meeting agenda. We'll talk through some of the summary notes from the last meeting. We're going to get a quick update on community engagement processes and activities to date, and talk a little bit about what's to come. We're also going to have a group discussion. Actually, I'm sorry, next we're going to have an update on what's going on in the Deer Station area, give you a quick update on what's happening in the planning department and everything going on related to that area. We're also going to have a group discussion, and we'll talk a little bit about it when we get there, but that's why you have the colored note cards in front of you. We'll talk about what that means shortly. We're going to have a fun, interactive discussion with you all about the desired outcomes. And then we're going to have time for public comment, as always, and then talk a little bit about next steps. So, group agreements. Again, I'm not going to dive too deeply into these. You guys have been fantastic, been very respectful, open to different perspectives, understand that we're a very diverse community with a lot of great ideas. And again, we're here to have fun and make new friends. And I think we've done that after 10 meetings, so it's fantastic to see you all here again tonight. So very quickly, the summary notes from the last meeting. We did have a report back from the Jobs, Education, and Economic Development group. There was some points raised. I'll just highlight a couple here. Potential concern that the city is being maybe too stringent on Google, recognizing that maybe we're not as stringent, or the city might not be as stringent on other developments or developers in the area. We considered benefits that Google can bring. Recognize that Google is actively listening in the process, really capitalizing on Google's strengths. And these are, input that we received from you all after we did the report out. With housing displacement and gentrification, there was some questions around acquiring land. How does that actually equal, or how does that not equal converting existing neighborhoods? How do we do that without impacting surrounding neighborhoods? We talked a lot about high density housing. And we talked about impact fees and ongoing basis and how that might impact the process. And there was a lot of great discussion around housing that we're going to talk about, both these topics and the 3 or 4 others that we brought up earlier tonight. So we'll have a chance to make sure that we got it right. So that was very quick. Any thoughts on those notes from the last meeting? Anything that was missed? Yes, Jeffrey.
Yeah, just a comment. Does staff feel like that how that's presented, that was where the bulk of the conversation was? Because that seems rather unrepresentative, I think, of the conversation that was actually had. It doesn't reflect any of the kind of support and conversation about what the solution groups actually presented. In the jobs group, I didn't see any bullet point talking about the issues around job quality and subcontracted workers, but that was the bulk of the conversation. It seems a little bit like there was some cherry-picked, aspects of the conversation that were highlighted and placed in the beginning that were actually pretty minor footnotes in the overall conversation. I'm not sure that those, as presented, like for instance, even the issue of a community benefits agreement was the very last bullet in displacement, but there were plenty of comments about that from multiple speakers. Just reflection on what you were actually trying to accomplish with those notes.
Sure. I mean, that's a highlight from kind of the consultant team that we thought were just some of the main topics that came up. There's a full summary that's posted on the website that gets a little bit further into detail about what was discussed. And this is really just after we presented the report out from each group, and definitely those topics came up in the report outs, and we'll have a chance to talk about those again tonight. But we weren't meaning to overlook any major topic. We just hit on some of the key points that were discussed that evening.
I would just, I would not support approving those particular notes to be presented in any future representation of what that conversation was. I would really appreciate it if staff would have a look back at the conversation that took place and try to record what was actually spoken about. It seems like there was a couple of small critiques that have an oversized role in what was recorded there versus what the conversation was actually about.
Thanks for that input, Jeffrey. We'll make note of that. Thank you. Any other comments before we move on to the next section of the agenda? Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Lori.
All right, so we have now completed 5 pop-up workshops. Most recently was the stroll on the Alameda, and we have one upcoming for September 23rd at Viva Calle. We've completed 3 stakeholder meetings and have several more in the works. And just to reiterate, those are meetings that a community group is hosting, and they have invited city staff to come present on the Diridon station area and our community engagement process, and so we attend as a guest speaker. So just a reminder, we completed 4 community forums back in June, and we have 3 community meetings scheduled for September. Hopefully you all saw the announcement that went out recently and can help us spread the word and encourage people to attend these. The emphasis on the outreach in September, specifically with these meetings and an online feedback form, is going to be reporting back on preliminary desired outcomes from engagement process and get additional feedback. So it's whereas the community forums in June, we asked very open-ended questions looking to get people's hopes, concerns, ideas, questions out on the table. And now we'd like to show the community what we've been hearing and get reaction to those. So that's the emphasis for September. So that's all I had to report. Any questions? Maria?
Maria Noel Fernandez with Silicon Valley Rising. And I wanted to say, so I've been hearing a lot from our base, from Silicon Valley Rising's base, around the engagement process, and I've been holding them, but I wanted to raise it in this space to get both more information, but also see how we can make the next process of engagement better. And so I wanted to lift up the areas that have been raised to me over and over again that relate to some of this that I see here. One is that it'd be helpful to have more clarity on what the forums are really about. While we know, and some of our friends know, what the Diridon Station area is, and that we're talking about the Google project, having them labeled as just that versus that this is really about Google, I think is not clear enough to the community in terms of what the heck we're talking about. And so when we think about outreach and getting more people engaged in this process, I want to just check in with staff in terms of how you all are thinking about putting the forums out there, and if that's something you all are thinking about, and really want to encourage you to think about that. The second one related to that is around outreach. My understanding from the past forums is that most of the outreach was done via email. Had some council members support and get out there to their email list, but what we all know is that not everyone, particularly my base, is not on email lists necessarily. And so I'm curious if you can report back on how outreach was done. Did we have any Folks going door to door? Did we have any mailers that actually went out? And what's the plan moving forward for these forums so that they're better? And then just two last items. I think one, I would love details on what the agenda will actually be for these upcoming forums. I think one of the concerns that we've heard is that the forum, the way that the structure of the meeting was held, the first piece of it was really, someone called it a road show for Google. And what's hard about that is that people don't feel like they're actually authentically being heard versus being sold a project. And so I would love details on how the engagement process is actually going to look moving forward and if it's going to be different. Because I only went to one of them, admittedly, but that's what I felt as well. And so how do we actually do authentic engagement process versus just saying, this is how great it is, this is what is being addressed on housing, and essentially saying, y'all don't worry. That's what a lot of folks have shared with me was what was felt in some of those spaces. And then lastly, one of the positive pieces from the last forums was that one was held on the east side, and that it was, I think the intention was to have it be done in Spanish. I do want to share that having it done by a translator is not necessarily what folks imagine when they think about a meeting being run by the city in a culturally competent way. And so as you all think about the next 3 meetings, very exciting that's going to be at Gardner, at the Vietnamese American, and at MHP. I want to hear how you're going to make sure that those meetings are done in a culturally competent way, and just a translator is not enough. So wanted to lift up those areas and would love to hear feedback on all those 4 areas. Thank you.
Just to clarify, feedback now or report back later?
That would be great.
Okay.
If we have them, report back on the pieces that you don't have.
Can you repeat the first two, just summary, just so I make sure I get the right order?
Outreach, how has it been done? How will it be done moving forward? And how are you capturing people that are not on an email list? So are you doing a mailer? Are you doing neighborhood canvassing? What's the strategy being used for outreach? Related to the outreach is clarity on how these forums are being advertised, Diridon Station area versus just Google, and how that's being incorporated so people are clear on what they're getting invited to.
So for the forums, we developed a flyer and sent that around to you all, to council members. It was sent to the neighborhood commissioners, and we posted on social media, Facebook, Twitter. And so we did rely primarily electronically, but with the hope and expectation that the community leaders that we forwarded the flyer to would spread it to their constituents. So that is the same strategy that we are using this time. We did not send out a mailer or do door-to-door knocking. So it's been mainly through our connections with the community leaders.
And is that something that there could be funding allocated from the city to actually do more targeted outreach? Because I know in other cases, and thinking about a development this size, that this warrants doing a mailer or doing more targeted outreach?
I think we can take that input and discuss it. Getting soft head nods.
If I just want to reiterate, as we've said before, this process is much earlier than, and much more extensive than for any typical development project. So maybe what you're referring to is once there is a project and a project application is filed with the city, then it goes through a very specific process where certain milestones trigger notification of people within X geography around the particular project. So that's not what we're doing here. And we're really relying on you and on the networks of people that are already in communication with people who care about this to work with us to get the right people who care to the forum.
And I can appreciate that, and I think I'm actually not saying that this should be following the typical city process. I think everything about this project is not typical, and so I think we need to be actually figuring out how do we build the best community engagement process possible given how important this is for our city and for the future of our region. That's what I'm talking about, is are we actually building the best community process? And given just where we are in the process and that we're adding these 3 next forums, I think it's an opportunity to actually reflect and say, okay, how do we make these better? because I think the feedback I've gotten is they have room to be better.
I hear you. That was the first point, Maria. Sorry, I want to make sure we address all your other points.
So on the last two, and I'm glad the question was asked because, my skin crawled at the last meeting during public comment when the two statements, I think, Maria, which you were referencing, which that the two presenters at Mayfair did not speak Spanish. Just so you're aware, that's an absolute inaccuracy. The meeting was actually translated in reverse. So people that were there that didn't speak Spanish were spoken to in English. So the whole meeting was done in Spanish, the presentation and the facilitation. So total inaccuracy. On the second and how these meetings are going, granted, it's easy to poke at process. We can always make improvements. The feedback I heard, public comment last week, which I believe you're referring to, Maria, was that one of the questions we asked was, what are some of the opportunities you see with this development? We also asked, what are your concerns and what are your fears? For us not to ask the full scale of what you believe on this project or Diridon Station, we're not doing our jobs. Obviously, there's a ton of fear in this room and outside. There's also a lot of people that think this is a great opportunity for the city, and it's our job to get all of that and put it in the report, not just go out and solicit a certain type of feedback. So the fact that people are upset that we asked, well, what do you see as an opportunity with this development? That's fine. I'm willing to wear that because that's our job to bring all of that in.
Yeah. Well, and two things that come to mind. One is that this isn't actually a poke. This is actually someone that's really invested in figuring out how do we get more people engaged in this process, because I think many people care deeply about it. So it's less about this isn't perfect. It's about, okay, we have these next 3 forums. How do we actually make them better? And so if there's space to have that conversation, great. If there's not, I think we should push for it. And then I think the other piece is that it was less about a specific question that I heard, but more about the front end of particularly OED at the front, just really talking about how there's already a path that the city is taking to address housing displacement and gentrification. And so again, as we look at the next forums and the agenda and how they're run, I want to make sure that it's really based in engagement versus anything else.
Yeah, and as the person who led the team that put the presentation together, I am always happy to accept any feedback. And I also received feedback from a lot of people that, gosh, it was so helpful at the front of the meeting to lay out all of the history and the process and the timing and to frame these challenging issues and opportunities that are here. I think the statement that you're referring to, I recall it very well, and I actually have it written down. And I know it's on video, and I've used it many times. And what I've said was that this city council, prior to Google even thinking about coming to San Jose, was working with the community to take very seriously concerns about displacement and affordable housing. And what I put up there was a set of 5 or 6 things that factually this city council has done. And then I made the appointment, I made the statement that, and of course, more needs to be done. And in the context of these conversations, we have an opportunity to think more about equitable development and economic mobility and continue to do innovation in that area. So I did not say everything is done already. I very intentionally wanted to acknowledge the good work that people in this community have done together with this council. And I said, then there's room to do more. But I welcome any feedback, just taken offline on that presentation, because we've given it quite a bit of times now, just intent to put the basic facts about where we've been, what we're doing, what happens next, and to frame some of the challenging issues. That was the intent.
Great. And then in terms of the next forums, could we have more clarity on that we're talking about the Google project versus just labeling it Diridon? This is feedback that I heard. People are like, I had no idea that was what that was.
Yeah, like Kim said, I'm also open to feedback on how to do that. The flyer does have in the first bullet of the objective that we're, but I guess if there's more specific feedback, let's talk about it, because that wasn't our intention. It was to have Google there as being a key part of what's happening
Yeah.
in Dearborn.
Great, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Oh, sorry, Kevin.
After that set of questions, this may sound a little simplistic, but, Kevin Chrisman, Gardner Neighborhood Association. I look and I can tell what the target audiences are probably for the September 11th and 25th meeting, but what are you looking for a target audience for the Gardner Community Center? Who are you hoping to attract, other than everybody I know?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. We intentionally wanted to announce all three of these at the same time to make sure people realized they could go to any one of the three, and the timing may not be convenient. So they're definitely general public audience. We wanted to spread them out across the neighborhoods. So the Gardner Community Center, I think, is pretty close to the Dearborn Station area. So general downtown, North Willow Glen, Dearborn area, I think is probably, the most likely audience, but they are open to everyone. Eddie?
Eddie Trung, Director of Government Relations for the Silicon Valley organization. I just want to make a few comments that I just want to commend staff, particularly Kim Wallesh, for your work in presenting to our 70-member board directors when it comes to community engagement process. I do want to mention that I believe that staff are doing the best they can, that are humanly possible, in order to do a productive community engagement process. Given that there is no project right now, and that the Dearborn Station is a much larger placemaking opportunity than just simply Google, But the thing is that I think it is incumbent upon this body to help staff out if we need to do better community engagement, and for us to be able to put skin in the game when it comes to that. And so I would challenge everyone to support the community engagement process, to bring your communities out here, and to share all the feedback that's available. If anything, I really would like for us to move forward to the next part of the conversation for this presentation, and these are my comments for now.
Thank you. And Nadia?
My first question is, how is public comment from the SAG meetings getting inputted as part of this engagement process? Because I don't see it in any of the meeting minutes, and I'm not sure where it is. And kind of along that line, there was a lot of public comment last meeting. This room was really inadequate for all of the people who want to give public comment. I understand that we have an agenda, we have a lot of things to do, but it seems like people are just given a short time to give public comment. There's not a ton of engagement. So I guess my question is, how are we capturing that feedback? And then, there was a protest last time, and it seems kind of weird that it's not even mentioned. Because, like it or not, it's part of the public engagement process. There are people who don't like this project who are, protesting against it, and I think it should be stated somewhere that these people exist.
Yeah, so all feedback on public comment is being captured by the consultants and rolled up into some of the summary things, but also you're going to start seeing it, some of desired outcomes and some of the reports that we have in the report that talk about the larger community engagement. Understand that this room isn't ideal. We've thought about moving that across the street to San Jose State, and Charlie's offered that. We have direction to make sure all of these are videotaped and recorded, so this room is really our solution. We've opened up next door as we did last meeting, and no one took advantage of that. They felt they wanted to protest instead of go next door and watch, and that was their prerogative. We put in the meeting minutes that the meeting, I think our third meeting that was interrupted, and many people around this table felt that that was a jab against the community. So that is specifically why there's no mention of a protest outside last time, because several of you thought that that wasn't representative of you guys or the general public we're here to discuss under public comment. So I didn't put it in.
It's part of the public, and
she felt that it should have been recorded because it was part of the public engagement. And I'm fine putting that in there. We did last time, and the group felt that it wasn't necessary, and that was I kind of felt like that it was I don't want to put words in the mouth because that was a long time ago, but several people around the table thought it was staff digging at the community for us, saying that there was a protest and the meeting was interrupted.
And just as, I should,
Maria.
Maria Noel, Silicon Valley Rising, just to say, the room wasn't ready immediately when people got here, and so I think part of people saying we don't want to be moved is because the doors were locked, there was police at the door yelling at people, people were angry. So does it warrant them not wanting to go to the next room and give their testimony? I don't know, but people were not feeling heard and respected. There were several issues outside of the room that were happening while we were in here, so I think it's a lot more complicated than people having a room open to them and not moving over.
I would agree it's a lot more complicated than that. Yes.
I also would, I disagree. I think it's also an issue of placemaking. The protesters, if they went to another room, they're separate, but they're not equal. They would not be able to be seen. They would not be able to be heard. And so I think it was wise on their side to stay in this room. And so I disagree with your comment. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move forward? Okay, thank you.
No, just my only last comment is, really, and I promise y'all, because I know we all want to move on. I do want to get home too. My only comment is that, again, I will say what I said already. This is not about poking or jabbing. We have new forms coming up. We haven't done the survey that we said was going to happen. So as we think about the next phase of our work, how can it be better?
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we're going to transition to giving you a quick update on goings-on through planning at the Deer Dam Station area, and Rosalind's going to walk you through that.
There we go. Good evening. Sorry about that. Good evening again. My name is Rosalind Huey. I'm the director for the Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement with the city, and glad to be with you this evening. So I was asked to share some information, some overview information, highlight information regarding development activity in the downtown Diridon area, as well as give you an overview of a project that our department is working on regarding updating design guidelines for downtown in Diridon. And so with that, I have actually a hard copy of this map that's included in the presentation. I know it's pretty hard to see. But just very generally, wanted to give you, provide an overview of all of the development activity that's going on in our downtown. It is quite significant, and we're very excited about that. So this particular map actually shows about 57 different development projects represented in the downtown area. And an overview of those projects, it actually includes about 10,700 dwelling units or homes, about 330,000 square feet of retail space, and about 3.4 million square feet of office space. And just want to also just clarify, so this is a comprehensive overview of the development activity. So these projects are at various stages of the development process. So these projects include what we call preliminary reviews, which are projects that are just in to get some assistance. There aren't actually official development projects submitted to the city, so we have a handful of those, I think about 3 of those in the area. And then we have development projects that are currently under review by the planning department and other city agencies. And then we have a host of projects that have just been recently approved, as well as projects that are currently under construction or just recently completed. So that's a full comprehensive list of development activity, but it shows, again, the significance of development that's going on in our downtown. And just wanted to break that out in terms, because I know that all of us are very interested specifically about development activity that's closest to the Diridon Station area. So of these 57 projects, if you look at the map, so if you look at projects that are west of Highway 87, we have about 19 development projects that are currently under review or recently completed, and then another 38 projects on the other side of Highway 87. And so then next, I just wanted to provide an overview of a work effort that's currently ongoing in the department to update the downtown urban design guidelines. And I just wanted to provide some context to this work effort. It's really a result of the city's focus to actually rebuild our urban design program and expertise throughout the city. So I'm sure many of you are well aware that for many years we haven't had the type of professionals, planners, architects, designers on staff to really focus on the design element of reviewing projects, of working across city departments. And so now we're really thrilled that the City Council has made this a focus to actually rebuild our urban design program. So last year, we actually received some initial grant funding, and the city actually hired its first principal city designer. And many of you, I'm sure you've met Tim Rude. Did I hear a clap? Thank you. We're very excited to have Tim on board. He's a seasoned design professional, over 2 decades worth of experience in urban design, and in particular, transit-oriented development projects. So we're very glad to have recruited Tim. And Tim is building his team of professionals on our staff, and they are now working across city departments on a host of different development projects. So one of our team's first task is to actually undertake updating all of the design guidelines for the city. So we have a host of existing guidelines that have not been updated for quite some time. We have guidelines that actually go back to 1999. And obviously many things have changed in the city since that time. So this particular body of work is very important. So we're going to be actually updating citywide guidelines for residential, commercial, industrial, as well as our historic guidelines. And this body of work actually is a priority of the City Council. It's on their City Council priority list. And really it does speak to the city's goal of really becoming a great place and the focus on our public realm and design of our buildings and our environment. So just to share with you a little bit about the scope of work for the project. So we're actually starting phase 1 of the comprehensive body of work to actually update the guidelines for downtown. And we also obviously want to include the Diridon area in that work effort. Our existing guidelines for downtown, so they date back to 2004, and again, lots have changed since that time. And so we're also taking the opportunity to actually integrate the guidelines for the Diridon Station area plan that was completed back in 2014. So finally, we'll have one complete, comprehensive document for design guidance for the downtown area. So for this project, we actually kicked off the process earlier this year. Back in April, we held our kickoff community meeting. And this month, we're completing some focus group meetings with individuals and stakeholders. For example, we've met with design professionals across the city, developers, the Downtown Association, other organizations, and obviously we'll be doing continued outreach to neighborhood groups in downtown in Diridon. We actually have just developed an initial draft of the document itself. So we actually have a document to share that people can actually review page by page and give us guidance and input on that. And then we will bring this initial draft to our next community meeting that's going to be scheduled in late October, early November to get community feedback. And then in terms of our schedule, we anticipate finishing up the product by the end of the year. So we anticipate getting to Planning Commission for their review by the end of the year, and then to City Council for their approval in early 2019. And then lastly, just wanted to talk about the importance of getting feedback and input and what it means to actually to provide that input into this work product. And so we're glad that we're already getting input from the SAG. So the Land Use and Urban Design Solution Group, I know they've had a couple of meetings already where they've talked about the values for downtown in Diridon, some of the guiding principles and some of the values that are important to the area. And so these comments have already been reflected in our initial draft document for the Downtown Urban Design Guidelines. And these include reflecting the area's unique character, really creating a strong district identity. It's very important to us. Emphasizing the human scale design that is actually safe for people, interesting, and obviously we want it to be high quality and attractive. And then finally, including design standards for the area's skyline, for parking design guidelines, for signage, which is so important, for art and other cultural elements, and obviously for quality design. So again, we look forward to your continued participation in this work effort, and we look forward to many of you, I'm sure, participating in the upcoming community meeting. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Yep. Thank you very much, Rosalind. Was there any questions for Rosalind before we move on to the next section of the agenda? Yes. Name and organization, please. We forgot to do that before. Thanks.
Shiloh Ballard, Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. So great. This is a nice outline. Thank you. I'm wondering if you can, like, for someone like me, just take what's more on the abstract side and like give maybe a concrete example of like where are the current design guidelines out of sync, like how would it like is there a particular project or something you can talk about in how that's manifested that makes it just a little more real for someone like me?
So certainly, good question. So some of the things that we're looking to update, I think that probably 2 decades ago, the city really did have an aspiration that the downtown would really truly be a very urban mixed-use environment. And certainly that's our goal now. Unfortunately, in the existing guidelines, we really don't speak to in terms of high-rise development, particularly not so much about the height of the building, but the experience for the pedestrian at the street level. So paying particular attention to the ground plane, to making sure that that space is well activated, that it's attractive, that the public realm works well for the pedestrian, really for everybody using the streets downtown. So that includes people in cars, on bicycles, pushing strollers. So those are some of the elements that we're really looking to update, that we really need to do in terms of promoting and making sure that we're really going to have that high-quality urban mixed-use development for downtown.
Great. We'll go to Harvey and then to Kathy.
Harvey Darnell, North Willow Glen. I know you said the number, but I missed it. How many housing units are currently under construction or in the pipeline?
Yes, absolutely. So it's 10,700 homes, 330,000 square feet of retail, and about 3.4 million square feet of office. And I should share with you, for each one of these projects identified on the map, we can provide specific information for each development proposal or project that's already completed. Actually, a wealth of information is available on sjpermits.org. We also have a planner on staff who is dedicated to the development projects downtown. Particularly, her name is Emily Lapoma, and she would be a great contact if people are looking for specific information about any of these projects, trying to get an idea of schedule. She would be a great person to contact, and obviously you can contact me.
So this group has been made aware of the housing imbalance, housing shortage in the area, okay? Not that San Jose hasn't done its share of building housing versus building jobs. So the question comes to us is how many housing units are currently authorized within the general plan for the next, and this is not something you need to answer today, but it would be helpful for us as we begin to write our final report to show where the housing units will be, and that indeed, as Google brings in all kinds of workers, not just the tech workers, but the other support workers, that there will be places to house these people.
Great question, and Harvey, I should know this information off the top of my head, but some data that I do know and can share with you. So our current general plan is a plan that plans for growth, for the anticipated growth. So our projected growth to 2040 is about 470,000 people, which we've equated to about 120,000 new homes. So our current general plan, it has that capacity based upon our land use designations to accommodate that growth from now to 2040.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Kathy and then come back here to Jean.
Thank you, Kathy Sutherland with Delmas Park. When you're looking at your downtown design guidelines, will you also be incorporating the interface between new dense development and existing single-family homes?
Absolutely, great point. And we know that's something that is of great interest really to all of us in terms of the compatibility with higher density next to lower density residential neighborhoods. So definitely that is definitely a consideration in the guidelines, absolutely.
Thank you.
And we're looking at areas that we can use for transition just to make sure that it's done well and high quality and respectful of the existing residential character that's surrounding downtown.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Jean and then to Leslie.
Jean Cohen, Building Trades Council. Thank you, Rosalind, for the presentation. I just have a question. Can you tell us what the status is on the downtown EIR update and how it might affect the work that we're doing here?
Great question. So yes, the city is currently updating the downtown strategy in EIR for downtown. And through that effort, we are adding development capacity for downtown. So we're adding 10,000 jobs and 4,000 housing units for downtown. And this body of work has actually been underway for quite some time. We are actually very close to releasing the draft EIR document by the end of this month. So it will be out definitely by the end of next week. And then we anticipate getting to Planning Commission for hearing at the City Council later this fall. So that work effort is wrapping up, which is very important because that will give us the additional development capacity for downtown.
Thank you. We'll go to Leslie and then John.
Leslie Hamilton, Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. First, thank you to whoever on your staff listed Guadalupe River Park and the various park elements. And secondly, the River Park has a design guideline that was adopted in 2003, and I just wanted to confirm that that would be incorporated in your design guideline update.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up so much, Leslie. Yes, that will definitely be incorporated into this new body of work.
I will go to John and then back here to Jeffrey.
Hi, John Pinigo with PACT. I was just wondering if you could comment on a lot, when we talk about the human scale, is there also a cultural scale as well? We have a lot of different cultures in the community, Latino, and it was a very large presence in downtown for many, many years. And one of the comments of the early, because I've been around for a million years, on redevelopment is that a lot of the Latino businesses were displaced. And there was just the kind of the feel of downtown with that, like they built that, what was that first thing, the pavilion, right? That pavilion of what not to do. But it didn't look like anything that really spoke or resonated with the community. Is there any, like, a value or like published principles or values that we're looking that would really reflect some cultural sensitivity to API folks, to historically, other kinds of things? And the other piece was just looking at how that would touch and build on our history, because a lot of San Jose is losing that as well.
Yes, great point. So I think that definitely speaks to our desire for the guidelines to really speak to our identity, who we are, and actually to celebrate our diversity and the richness and the different cultures. So absolutely, these guidelines will take that into consideration. And I will also add that the department's been fortunate enough to also recruit a new historic preservation officer. And she will be working alongside with the design team and actually providing that input for the design guidelines, yes.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Jeffrey and then back here to Nicole.
Appreciated the presentation. Just a question on the, unrelated to the design standards, but onto the development projects in downtown map that we were presented. And sorry for the members of the public who can't actually see this. Earlier in the meeting, it was stated, and I've heard this reiterated a couple of times, that there is no Google development project. In terms of number 23 on the map, it's the Dearden Transit-Oriented Development. It's my understanding that that's a project that Google has either purchased or is in the process of purchasing, and it's listed as a major development project on the map. So is it fair for city staff to be characterizing that there is no Google development to speak of in terms of some of the public conversation going forward?
Thank you. And I have a smaller version. So 23, I just want to be sure that it says Dearden Transit-Oriented Development. And I believe that that is referencing, and I can double check because I do have my notes on what this particular application is, but I'm pretty sure that this is Destination Dearden project, the Trammell Crow office development that was previously approved. And so this is for about 1 million square feet of development. And again, I can give you the accurate information on that development program. So that is a completely separate project from a future proposal that we may get from Google.
No, certainly it's separate from a future proposal, but it is a development, a major development, I'm seeing it listed as, in Dearden Station, owned by Google. So I've just been kind of troubled that we've, again and again, when we're having conversations about why should we be having a public conversation around this potential large development, that the question, or the idea has been put forward that, well, there's no development yet, so the level of conversation should be different than if there were a development. But, yes, it's a development that's been approved, but let's, not fool ourselves. There's already a plan on the books for 1 million square foot development where Google is the owner. And I think we need to be clear about that it wasn't even raised in this conversation. If we were presented with this map, you know, no, we even pointed out that that's a Google-owned project, for instance. I think we just need to be clear about where we are in some of the decision-making and clarify what decisions are before the city, what developments are already in play, and perhaps what we may happen moving forward, and have a little bit more clarity instead of all the ambiguity that we've seen, even in this conversation here, of folks that, you know, spend hours and hours having these conversations. And so I'd appreciate it if the city and staff could be a little bit more clear going forward on some of these things.
Thanks for the input, Jeffrey. We're going to go to Nicole and then back here to Eddie.
Thank you, Rosalind, for your presentation, and also this map is really great, so thank you for that. I just had a quick question on the design guidelines. The older 90s version of the design guidelines, you had said they don't really, is it that they don't speak on urban mixed-use environments, or are there elements of that design guideline that prevent urban mixed use? Just wanted to understand a little deeper.
Yeah, so I would probably say a little bit of both of that, right? So in terms of today, the high-rise urban type projects that are being developed, there are many components of our existing downtown guidelines that just don't capture some of those elements. And again, I gave you the example of the importance of the ground plane and the experience for the pedestrian, and making sure that we have ground floor heights that are high enough to accommodate those type of activated uses like restaurants or other active uses. So those are the types of things. And then to your point, are there items, new items that we would want to include in the design guidelines? I would say yes, there probably are. For example, and I mentioned this earlier in terms of, and the solution group has identified, for example, our skyline, how important the skyline element is, particularly here in the downtown. We really do want to encourage distinctive buildings, really iconic buildings that have a variety in the design, particularly at the skyline, so we can really have a high quality, I would even say we want a world-class quality experience here in the downtown, so that would be another example.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Eddie and then wrap it up with Edward.
Eddie Trong, Director of Government Relations at the Silicon Valley Organization. Hi, Rosalind. I have a question. Given that we are currently in a housing crisis and we are looking to plan growth within the confines of the existing general plan, is there any interest from city staff towards removing key policy hurdles in order to accelerate housing production and to furthermore encourage more high-density developments within Dearborn Station? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, yes. So there's interest by staff, obviously, and actually we've been given direction by the council to look at those elements and things in our policies and regulations that we can modify to actually spur more residential development. So for example, I'll throw out that issue of parking. Parking in development projects is a huge cost. That's a big factor, right? It's a huge cost for developers who are building projects, and it's a huge cost for people wanting to live in urban environments. So to the extent that we can decouple parking from residential units, that's a key component. We're also looking at modifying our parking requirements. So for example, currently we have parking minimums in our zoning code. So we're going to be looking at the idea of actually changing that and having parking maximums. So there are many cities across the country, they've had, been looking at changing that metric for requirements for quite some time, in cities that have been quite successful. So that's an example of one thing that staff is looking to in terms of spurring additional residential development, as well as addressing the affordable issue as well.
Great. I just wanted to close it out. Given that just a few months ago, the San Jose City Council hosted a study session that showed that most developments are practically unviable within most parts of the city. I think the easiest low-hanging fruit that we can achieve to encourage development throughout the entire city is to look at those policy hurdles and to encourage as much development as we can for residential projects. I do also want to make a quick comment that there was, I think we need to be rigorous in our definition about what development at the Google-owned lands are. Land has been purchased, but it is my understanding that there's no formal project application that is in the pipeline. And so when we're being intentional and thoughtful about our process, the key here is that we have to continue to take feedback, but you can't really give any substantive feedback on a project that hasn't been formally submitted yet. And I just want to make a comment that we should be more thoughtful and comprehensive in our approach.
Thank you, Eddie. I think we'll wrap it up here with Edward.
Thank you, Edward Salm, Shasta Henshaw Park Neighborhood Association. Obviously, we are thrilled. The addition of Juliet to the staff was a big thing. The other thing I thought perhaps you could speak to the timing of the update to the design guidelines and the completion of the historic resources survey, because the completion of that obviously could move some projects and buildings, et cetera, from the non-historic design guidelines to the historic design guidelines. So I wasn't sure timeline-wise where the two will dovetail.
So we're working on both at the same time. I will say that completing the historic inventory is going to take us a bit longer than updating the downtown urban design guidelines. They're both, like I said, we're working on both concurrently. But while we're thrilled to have Juliet, she still is pretty much a one-person or two-person team at this point, so we know it's going to take us a little bit longer. I know that we're going to be working on the inventory probably throughout most of 2019. So, you know, that work is important, and definitely for our development proposals, we've had so many experiences where applicants have come in on their site, initiated their CEQA and historic analysis, and gotten very late in the process, and then find out, oops, you know, this is a historic element, contributing factor. So again, I agree with you, to the extent that we can complete that historic inventory, it's gonna help us all out. It's just gonna take us a little bit longer than the downtown guidelines, unfortunately.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rosalind. Looks like we don't have any other questions here. Oh, we do have one more. Nadia, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I forgot about this. You mentioned 10,000 units. Do you know how many are affordable? And is there anything in the guidelines about equity or displacement or affordability in the actual design guidelines?
So to the latter question, there's not specific language regarding affordability in the urban design guidelines. I think there's many places, many policy documents where that information is more appropriately suited. So the guidelines won't specifically address that. And then to your previous question on the 10,000 units, you were asking, are any of those going to be affordable? So again, the 10,000 units, we're adding development capacity. So many of those units can be affordable, but we, at this point, in terms of the environmental clearance, we're clearing up to those 10,000 units. And for the environmental clearance, we don't have to specify exactly how many units need to be affordable or how many are market rate.
Okay. Thank you again. Any other final comments before we transition? All right, here we go. Thank you again, Rosalind. So, if we can get this to work. So, now we're moving on to a fun, interactive exercise with you all to confirm that we've characterized the desired outcomes correctly from all the group discussions that we've had, from the report outs that we've had. Us consultants have now taken the task of actually identifying what we see as the top desired outcomes, and now we want to have a group discussion with you all, and we're going to walk you through a little bit of background and context, and then tell you a little bit about what those colored cards are in front of you, and we'll go through each one of these topics. So I'm going to let Matt get us started.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, everybody. what we're going to do in this next about hour and 20 minutes, hour and 15 minutes, as Dave said, we're going to talk about, give you some report back on what we've heard so far from you that has come out of the solution groups and other discussions, to talk about the desired outcomes for the project. Let's see if I get this going in the right direction here. There. So what we're going to do is, to give us a little context, we're going to talk about a basic outline of the comprehensive report that's going to be coming forward in about a month. And then we are going to go through this consolidated set of desired outcomes, many of which you've seen, and what we've just really tried to do is to step back and look at all of the comments and come in at a high level and say, what is the sort of the body of what it is that you all have said through your discussions here and through the solution groups. What we're going to do with that information is we are going to try to gauge the general level of agreement on each group of desired outcomes. We want to identify where there really is agreement and where differences exist in opinion. And then what we have always said in this process is our job here is to listen and reflect. And part of that reflection, we just lost microphone again. Is this one now working? Hopefully. Is this working? Okay. All right.
So keep on using the microphones. They're going to reset it. It takes 3 minutes. We have to put all the power to the air conditioning.
Not funny.
We are getting, the new system's still running, so keep on using the microphones. It should switch on in about 3 minutes.
This is kind of awkward, talking into a microphone that's not working. Okay, so what we've said from the very beginning, that what we want to do is take all of the ideas and identify where there are commonalities and agreements and where there are disagreements, and where there are disagreements, we want to reflect where those disagreements exist. So we want to capture everything and communicate everything, and where there's agreement and where there might not be as So I want to go back to the beginning here, which is to take a slide from, I believe it was the first or second meeting. Now this is really getting awkward. High tech in Silicon Valley. So to go back to the beginning, and this slide that you see up here now is a slide that we actually presented at the first or second meeting of this group. The question of what do you want to see in the Google outcomes that we're going to be talking about today is actually, we feel, a reflection of this. This is again a review. This is what we said was a decision-making process. So SOG and other community input will be shared with the city administration, with Google, and with the city council. The community input that we're receiving is going to be as critical as the input that you all are receiving, and the input, all of it is going to be put together into the report. So not just the SOG, we will have separate notes at the end for the results of each of these meetings, but we're going to put it all together. And that input is not winner take all. It's not because everyone or the majority of people have an opinion that that's necessarily the direction it's go. There are going to be lots of different ideas that are going to be fed into this process. And so having diverse opinions and a sense of agreement is going to be important, and it needs to be communicated. The draft outline, and the reason I'll come back to questions at the end here. The draft outline that we have here, and there's two phrases highlighted in red here that I think are going to be the most important. So we're going to start with a summary, an executive summary, have an introduction, talk about the context of what's been going on in the area, development projects, other plans, other activities. We're going to summarize the community engagement process. And then we're going to have a chapter on desired outcomes. Talk about what those are in just a minute, but these are essentially the overall goals, direction for what you all want to see in the area and what the community has said they want to see. Then we're going to have a chapter on potential solutions. These are ways that you all have come up with, and we are going to reflect in the report, ways that the outcomes can be achieved. We're going to then have conclusions and next steps, and then the appendices, and the appendices are going to have all of the notes from all of these meetings, all of the notes from all of the community engagement processes, and all of the online engagement that happens. So we're going to try and have all of the actual information that we have heard and that we have taken in available, because we want to make sure that we're daylighting all of that. As you know, it is a lot of information that's coming in. We're doing our best to reflect it, but we also want to make sure it's all out there. So now, a quick definition of terms here, because there has been a little bit of confusion overall about what these terms mean and how we're using them. And so we want to try and kind of clarify this for everyone. So the first is the statement of a desired outcome. This is kind of the what. The what do you want to see in the area? They're high-level statements that have represent a desired end state. Think of it as an aspiration, a hope, a vision, a goal. We didn't want to get into the what's a vision, what's a goal language. We just called it one thing. It's where do you want to get to, and what are really the values that you all have reflected. And that's what we're trying to get at in the desired outcomes. This is going to help inform the MOU in the short term and the DSAP update, station planning, project review. So all of these ideas are going to help in many ways, not just from the potential Google project, but also to the station area, the downtown area, and the city as a whole. The next is the potential solutions. And this is the how. How are the desired outcomes going to be achieved? They are actions, mechanisms, policies, programs, projects, partnerships. They are things that can happen and that can be done in order to achieve the what, or the desired outcomes. Some of them, and you all have come up with these, some of them are pretty specific about what you want to see, and some of them are a little bit more general and need some more fleshing out. To be clear, the report is not going to analyze the feasibility of the potential solutions. We are going to reflect what those solutions are. And we are not going to analyze and say that at this point, one is better than the other. Our job now is, again, to reflect what is there and what we have heard. So then the information, for how the information will be used. So we have sort of three levels that we're talking about here, and we know that this has, and it came up with from Maria's comment about like what are we actually talking about here? Is it Diridon Station? Is it the Google project? The reality is that a lot of the comments that have been made can fall in sort of three separate buckets. And this is something that we internally have struggled with a little bit because some of the comments are very broad and some are very specific. And so we are starting to think about the potential solution in these three areas: the Google project, the broader Diridon Station area and the downtown area, and then the city and the region. And the information, for example, for the Google project will be used for the memorandum of understanding. Some of the potential solutions can go into the project design, some can go into the development agreement, some are specific ideas about community benefits. For the Diridon Station area, the Diridon Station area plan is going to be updated, and for the land use and design meeting that we had, just as an example, the solution group, a lot of the ideas that came up are things that are reflected more broadly in that whole area. They will apply to a Google project if it happens, but they're also really more broad for how to create a great district here. And so that's where there's other development projects that are happening. There's the downtown design guidelines that we heard about, transportation, parks and trails projects. There's a lot of ideas that are going to sort of fit in this broader area of the station area and the downtown. A lot of the desired solutions and some of the ideas actually are going to happen at multiple levels. And then the third is the city and the region. And this information will go into general plan implementation, will go into the work that's being done by the city on the housing crisis work plan, the affordable housing investment plan, the economic and workforce development programs, city legislative initiatives. There's a lot of areas that may not feed directly into the Google project and the MOU, but they're going to feed in other places. And as Rosalind said, some of the information from the Land Use and Design Solution Group has already been part of the thinking for the downtown design guidelines. And so that sort of vertical integration is essentially what we're trying to go for here with the information, because we don't want all the ideas that you all have to be lost. We want to make sure they're being communicated. Okay, I'm going to pause here actually before we go into sort of the next step, and I want to see if there's any questions about what we have and what we've presented here, about how the information is going to be used. Make sure there actually is clarity on the difference between a desired outcome and a potential solution. Okay, start over here with Pilar. And again, name and organization.
Pilar Lorenzana from SB at Home. Hey, Matt. Quick question regarding...
Pilar, can you speak up a little bit? I think people are having a hard time hearing.
Of course, I'm sorry. I've never actually been accused of being silent, so this is new for me.
It's the microphone.
It's technology. In one of your previous slides, so my question is about how the policy recommendations are going to get characterized. Understanding that there is no additional layer of analysis around feasibility that's going to get, that staff has the opportunity to conduct. How are you going to parse out, or are you going to parse out the solutions at all? What sort of like organizing mechanism is going to exist, or is the idea to just present them all equally?
Yeah, so a good question, and something that we've actually struggled with a lot internally. At this point, it is about documenting rather than analyzing. And I think if we had a lot more time, because there have been so many ideas, if we had a lot more time, we would analyze all of the different options. But the reality is that for the process we have right now, we don't have all of the time to do all of the analysis. That is not to say that the analysis is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen as part of this report. So the ideas, and that's why it's really important, I think, to reflect everything and not to have things drop out, because there might be ideas that actually rise up later that become more feasible for a variety of reasons, whether it's cost or politics or anything, or desire, outcome that produces a great outcome. So we don't want anything to fall out. Okay, let's go around. John. So am I getting everyone? I'm just going to go around.
Yeah, John Pettigo, PACT. I guess when I'm looking at how the information will be used, it just gives me a little bit of concern, because we've a lot of what we've talked about from the community perspective was really displacement and what are we going to be doing, the impact of or the effect of having massive, unprecedented development in a fairly short period of time, and how that effect will have on the city, and it I just think there's an alternative frame, or another frame is really impact on community impact. But I see that we have it on Google and Diridon Station, and then there's this kind of other city and region. So I just voice that as a bit of a concern for me, that the things that were brought up in the subgroups around housing and economic development, those really are really speaking more strongly about impact. So I would just like to see, I'm not sure how that would be captured in the frame that you have presented to us right now. So I just raise that as a concern, as an alert, something that I think we ought to think about. I think some of us at the table, and I can't speak for others, but I can just say for myself that it raises an alarm, and it reflects a certain, so I feel a certain frustration welling up that that the concerns around displacement and impact are still seen as ancillary to what we're doing.
Okay. So, thank you for the comment. I think don't get frustrated yet. It is, I think, an important question, and it's not that these are not areas of impact. These are ways that and areas where the potential solutions can be implemented. So a topic like displacement or gentrification can actually flow through all of these areas. And I think our job is actually to make sure that the important ideas and displacement and gentrification and traffic and other concerns, the impact on small businesses, that it really does actually flow through all of these. Because that is the intent of it. It is not to try and omit it. These are not the topics. These are the sort of the geographic categories to which all of the ideas are being applied. I think is the best way that I could describe that. Okay, Shiloh, I'm going to keep moving around here.
Let's see, what was my question? On the first slide, group discussion purpose, and I guess the way, so my understanding is you're outlining what this report is essentially going to have in it and asking for our feedback on that, correct?
Well, yes, but I'll say that really what we want, the reason for setting up the outline was to show you the difference between desired outcomes and potential solutions and how we're addressing that in there. So again, we have sort of the goals, and again, sorry, I used the wrong word, desired outcomes, which are like goals or vision. See, I'm even confusing myself here. And then the specific ideas to achieve that have come out in the process. And so they're going to be done topically in the report, but they're also going to be separated out at this point. And we haven't written the report yet, so we actually might end up combining those, to be honest.
So I'm wondering is there a space in the report, and maybe it's included under identify where differences exist in the desired, well, I don't know, I'll just ask the question. In the beginning of the process, we heard about some of the other different planning exercises that have happened either with some overlap or adjacent to, and I just want to be respectful of those other planning processes and figure out how does that, either acknowledge them in the report in some way or also talk about, are we seeing major differences between what we're talking about here today and then past conversations about similar topics? Yeah.
I'll try to answer that. So the context, the background context section is going to address all of these things that have happened in the past and that are currently going on. Okay. The analysis of how much overlap is there is not necessarily something we've thought about yet, but it certainly is something we can think about. And I think it's a good point. And again, with the Land Use and Design Solution Group, we came up with a lot of ideas and then realized we didn't want to reinvent the wheel because a lot of it was there. Okay. Do a follow-up question? Charlotte, are you okay? Okay. Maria?
Maria Noel, Silicon Valley Rising. When will this, what are we calling it? Engagement report be submitted to the council? When will it be before the council?
That is one I need Lee's help on.
So it will, as soon as we are done with the report, so we're going to talk a little bit at the end of the meeting, the next SOG meeting, but 99% of that meeting will be spent on kind of finalizing this report and seeing where we're at. As soon as we move forward from this group, it's our intent to forward that to the council immediately through an informational memo so that they have it and they're aware of it before any other decision points come up in this project or any other decisions, unrelated to Google move forward. We'll also be doing that, making sure Google has it as well as all of our agency partners that are doing work within the Durham Station area. So it would be fairly immediate.
So just so I understand the process, so it'll be a memo and then an actual presentation before council?
I think I don't believe it would be going to council for a formal acceptance. We want them to have that in front of them, and it is what it is. It's this process to stand on its own, not for council to tweak that report or say that we don't want to accept that engagement or not. So at this point in time, we'd be forwarding it to them. We may want to do something, informational before any decisions are made, whether, like the MOU coming before the end of the year. So we're open to that. But as I told you guys at the very beginning, whether it was votes here or at council, I want that to kind of stand on its own and not have another body say we want to take something out or put something in.
Can you describe I don't know if I'm understanding, I don't know if others are, but so there would be an informational memo that would be a shorter version while you finish the full report, and that report may happen after the MOU?
No, not at all.
Sorry.
I think if depending on how this meeting goes and the one on September 27th, I think sometime in October, if we're feeling that report at that point in time is fairly final, we would forward the final report to them immediately so that there's time. As Matt mentioned, besides the Google MOU, which is very important, and we want the report to be final before that's ever mentioned. I'm up there with the legislative guiding principles, looking at the intergovernmental relations program. I have direction from the report that I should consider as I'm developing that, and that actually takes place in October. So it'd be my intention, and I think Kim's desire, to get that in front of council and the rest of the departments relatively soon.
Could we request that we get a date sooner rather than later? Because I know I just to say, I super appreciate the understanding that we want to get it sooner and doing all the staff work to make that happen. But it would be helpful to just know when to expect that. There is a lot of urgency around the next few months, and I want to make sure it gets to them and that the city council has the opportunity to really read through and reflect on what's in there.
Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. That's something we're trying to think through as well. So we will make sure we do that.
Thanks. Let's see. Nicole.
Yes, Nicole Lofts on the Alameda. I just wanted to echo Pact about community impact. Maybe I'm thinking this isn't too crazy if maybe under Google Project we could do community benefits / community impact, or community benefits and then bullet point community impact, just to really get that conversation on the table, because it honestly, it breaks my heart. It really does. Like, I'm not even kidding that it was just said that the protesters are not a reflection of our community, because last SAG meeting I went to, I was so excited and invigorated to see them, because I was like, this is America. This is how American politics work. It built that tension in the room of things that need to be said. And I think that those things needed to be said. And so I think that we really need to make sure that we discuss them.
So just to clear that up, I did not say that they didn't represent a part of the community or an important voice. What I said was, after the third or fourth meeting, I'm forgetting at this point which one was actually protested, in the meeting minutes, we put that the meeting was disrupted by protesters, and several people around this table thought that that was me digging on them for interrupting the meeting and trying to cause a political tension, which was not the case. So when we went through and did these minutes, I took that as a signal to not mention that. The meeting continued. They did their business, important business, raising important issues outside. We accommodated that. By no means of us not mentioning that in the minutes is them, or me, since you're saying what I said, was saying that they're not an important voice in this community.
So I apologize for that misunderstanding, but I would still like to push the point and agree with Pac that we should, include community impact on the Google project. How will this information be used? Because I think that it's the tension in the room, and it's very important to our community.
Okay, so two things with that. One is, I want to thank you actually for bringing that up. If that was your concern about the protesters and you were expressing your feelings about that, I'm glad you brought it up so that it could be cleared. So I think that's really important to do, and I appreciate you doing that. The second is this idea about community impact. I think that, oh, sorry, I was in the way again. Yeah, I told her to throw things at me if I get in the way. So this idea of community impact is a really important one. And I think the conversation we're having here is going to cause us, it will cause us to go back and look at the outline again and make sure that what we are doing in the outline and how we're reflecting it, how we're writing it reflects the concerns, really tries to really accurately reflect the concerns about community impact from the project. And whether it's called community benefit / impact, whether we have a separate category, I mean, again, these are big buckets, or whether we have a chapter called potential benefits and impacts of the project. Some way of doing that I think is a really good idea. And so I want to say I hear you, and we're going to go back and look at that.
Thank you.
Okay. Jeffrey.
Yeah. Just want to go back to an earlier point and get some clarity here. On the question of when this goes back to council.
So can you speak in
Yeah,
the
so
microphone?
Jeffrey Buchanan with Working Partnerships. I don't know if my mic's working. On the question of when this goes back to council, when the ENA was first being debated, folks who were there may recall there was a lengthy discussion about whether or not it was appropriate to give staff direction about community benefits, what should be a part of this eventual agreement with Google preceding a land sale. And at that time, it was said that there will be many opportunities for council to talk about this and give direction to staff about these ideas, including after a community engagement process. So I'm hearing some ambiguity here about this going as an informational memo and not necessarily as an item where there's time for council to hear this, debate it, consider additional direction to staff around the MOU, preceding the MOU coming to them as a pre-baked cake. And as we've talked about in the past, we know that there's significant pressure, there will be significant pressure on the council to make a decision in the affirmative because of the timelines around the compensation agreement and the SARA-owned parcels. And so I'm really concerned that this is all going to come as a package to council in November, December. There's not going to be a whole lot of time. If there's any question about what is or isn't in the MOU, those directions should have came from council to staff basically now because the negotiations are ongoing. So any delay on allowing council a public space to talk about direction for what should be in the MOU around community benefits is very important because, to my understanding, conversations about, the development timeline, the MOU, community benefits, they're not supposed to be happening in closed session. That's supposed to be a public conversation under the Brown Act. And so can we get a firm yes on will there be a space for council to debate, have had the input of this report and to have a public debate about what direction the staff should look like going into the MOU, preceding the MOU coming to council?
So I think that what we can do now, my guess is we can't get a yes because that has to be discussed internally. But what we can say is that I think very clearly hear the desire to make sure that this information goes to council and that the council has space to discuss it and direct staff on what should be done for the MOU.
In the public, I would say.
In the public.
Not just
Yep.
in closed session, because these are not the conversations that are supposed to be happening in closed session.
Okay, so we'll reflect that. Again, we can't give an answer tonight about it,
No.
but your point is.
And then just one other point, and sorry not to grab the mic for too long, but just in terms of design of the report, I'd really encourage you, again, going back to the ENA discussion, why this whole body was created. This is supposed to be the public engagement process connected to the decision-making around the land sale and that eventual development. It's all connected to elements of that private agreement, that ENA agreement between the city of San Jose and Google. We really need to make sure that we're emphasizing that first orange bucket of the, how these recommendations, particularly the Google project, what that looks like. When council directed staff and entered into this agreement with Google about creating a public engagement process, it wasn't about redesigning the DSAP. It was about getting public input around the decision for that possible land sale and this, forthcoming development proposal. And I'm really worried that if we it's okay to include these things, but we need to be clear about what the priority is, so it's not kind of like washed out what the point of this whole thing was. And similarly,
Let me just say, we agree that is what we didn't want to do is lose all the other ideas. We want to make sure that they
certainly,
have a
no,
home,
you
and that's what we're
capture
trying
them,
to reflect.
that's fine. And then, on that point, a lot of discussion of these solution groups, I attended every one that I was on. I think we just want to make sure that for the hows, that those line up with the whats. I'm seeing some of this in here where, some of the outcomes don't really reflect the discussions of what led to the top-rated policy decisions, particularly in the housing and the economic group. We'll get to it. But I think when you start to look at laying this stuff out, think about what those top-rated policies were. And then within the outcomes, are you seeing the discussion that preceded those kind of top-rated decisions? Is it there? If it's not there, then you probably got to go back and edit it, because I'm not seeing a lot of that reflected. It seems rather uneven in some ways.
Okay, and we can get to that. That's certainly kind of some of the level of comment we wanted in it. And again, it is also one of the things that we struggle with in doing this, which is lining everything up. And so we certainly want to try and do that as best we can. Not to say that we're going to get it right the first time. Okay, we're going to do 2 more comments. I think there's only 2 more over here, and I think that's it for the next, and then we'll move on to the next. Jean.
Thank you. Jean Cohen with the Building Trades Council. I just have a clarifying question. Are the desired outcomes a distillation of the solution groups discussions and the ranking that you asked us to do on those policies? Because it doesn't seem like the desired outcomes here are reflected in the notes that came out of the solution group. So maybe they're 2 different sets of information.
Well, again, good question. So what we tried to do was take the desired outcome, take the information that we got at a high level, multitasking, at a high level, and represent sort of the overall direction. There was voting that happened in some of the groups, and that voting tended to be more on the solutions and the details rather than necessarily the goals and the direction. So it was one of the things that we struggled with was to try and step back and create an overall direction without necessarily the specifics, and then support that with the specifics of the potential solutions. So it's sort of yes and no with that. So we didn't just use the top-rated potential solutions and turn those into desired outcomes. We looked at the whole range of things.
So I appreciate that information. It's helpful, but I don't think some of the massaging actually reflects the conversation. So maybe we could just look in the future to make sure there is alignment between what the solution groups identified as solutions as reflected in the desired outcomes document. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Nadia.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm confused a little bit about the first bucket with the Google project and how this report plays in with the 4 bullet point MOU project design, development agreement, and community benefits. So it seems like we're putting together this report. It's very high level, and it doesn't seem like it's really like talking really about community benefits in a very specific way. So I guess my question is it just that the report is getting attached to the MOU? When are we really talking about community benefits, like actual community benefits rather than high level? Like we want to see X, Y, Z. Is that with the MOU? Who is doing that? When is that happening? Is it with a development agreement? Who is the SAG? And if it is a development agreement, is the SAG going to be part of that process?
Okay, let me just start with some of that. So the report is not just high level. The report is the high level direction and the details. So it is everything that we have heard. And in some of the ideas that we have heard from the specific solutions can absolutely be taken as recommendations for specific community benefits, because there were very specific things that have come up, very specific ideas that came up in the groups, which we are going to reflect in that report. We are not going to go and say this one is a community benefit and this one is not a community benefit. We are merely going to reflect the whole range of ideas that have, as we have identified them and heard them, to include them in the report. And then in terms of the question of is the SOG going to be involved in the MOU, I think the SOG is going to be, the input that you all are giving here is going to feed into the MOU process, and the SOG is going to continue on into the future. Will the SOG review the details of the MOU before it's finalized? I think it's going to, I think it is, that is not going to happen. I think it's going to be a public document at some point, and that's when everyone is going to be able to comment on it.
So are there community benefits that are being part of the MOU, or is that something that's anticipated to come later? Because I know that there's very specific recommendations, but if you put a dollar amount on something, like we're not talking about dollar amounts, and I've been told like we're not talking about dollar amounts anywhere here, but I think that's an important aspect if you're talking about community benefits.
Yeah. Kim, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just.
Kim's been waiting to.
Well, no, just to be, because I just want to make sure expectations are all aligned, right? As we've said before, the MOU is a very high-level document, and it's a statement of intent. And the FAQs that we sent around, and I have some hard copies here if any of you want them, includes the major topics that are expected to be addressed. So question number 10, the major topics that are expected to be addressed in the City Google MOU. Again, at a high level. So topic number 1, shared vision and goals for the Google development. Topic number 2, goals for community benefits, contributions, and commitments. So the intention is that the MOU would sort of thematically talk about areas for community benefits, and it would talk about the process that we'll go through to determining perhaps the specific value at a future point once we know what the project is and we know all the value that's going to be created. But you're right, Nadia, that development agreement, which is probably 2 years from now, that's the very specific, legal, detailed document that would include, the intention is that would include a very specific community benefits plan that both parties would agree to and would be enforceable. So that's why all of these ideas are setting a framework and some themes and some approaches and what's important. But that development agreement is really where the very specific plan would be developed and placed.
And just real quick,
Yeah.
is there a role, anticipated role for SAG in that process, or?
Well, we said the SAG, and it's a station area advisory group, so the station area work is going to continue for a decade. So the intent is that in some form, an advisory group will continue and will be involved providing input. I can't say specifically, what vis-a-vis a development agreement, but certainly the conversation about community expectations and community benefits will continue through that whole period, and it will get more specific and more specific. Is that helpful? Yeah, and again, these FAQs, I just really encourage you to take a look, because we're being very transparent. These 15 items that are sort of like the outline for the MOU are what we're working on, and so this is what this is the content outline.
There'll be a quiz on the FAQs next time. Okay, so we need to move quickly. Can you just very quick, because we're way behind.
So I'm just looking at one example here around the jobs and education, and in looking, I'm actually step back. Does everyone have a copy of the ranking exercises that we went through?
Okay, so are you moving ahead in the PowerPoint?
I don't know. I don't know where I am. I mean,
Okay,
essentially, I'm just looking
may I
at.
see where you are?
Yeah, the conversation about desired
you're,
outcomes.
You're moving ahead, so if you could wait until we get to that.
Can we have a copy of the ranking exercises? Does everyone have that? Yes, we're gonna get that?
You had it, we've sent it out in packets before.
Got it, lots of packets. Does everyone have a copy of the ranking exercises? Tonight. What I'm trying to get at is that I am very worried that we're going to be going through a process tonight and spending all of our precious time around looking at these desired outcomes that are not reflective of the ranking exercise that we all went through.
Okay, that is a great segue. So thank you, which is that what we want to do is get feedback on what we have done here.
Uh-huh.
And if you feel that it's not reflective, then absolutely, that's the whole point of doing it. I'm sorry, Jean, what?
Well, my other point is that I appreciate that we all have binders, but, you know, we're all doing this on our volunteer time here. So if it'd be helpful, I think, for us in order to figure out if they're actually in line with what we've already talked about, to have copies of that.
How about this? Why don't
Or
we,
the link, something.
Why don't we see if we can pull it up on
Great.
a separate computer and we can flash it up on the screen? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Matt. So now we're transitioning to the fun part where we're going to ask you for your input. And to your point, Maria, we really want to kind of get one final feedback from you all on the desired outcomes, the way we've characterized them, recognizing that there's a whole host of input we've received from potential solutions to desired outcomes. We tried to characterize those that rose to the top, and we're here tonight to get your input. We thought we'd do something interactive with you all and have these color cards in front of you where we're going to go through by topic. We're going to identify the desired outcomes that you've probably seen in your packets if you look forward. And as we go through each topic, we're going to ask you to raise a card to say if you fully agree with everything that's on that slide. You'd raise a green card. If you mostly agree but you have some potential changes, you'd raise a yellow card. Or if you disagree with pretty much everything that's up there and you think it needs full change, you would raise a red card. And there's one opportunity where if you don't have any input at all, you don't have to raise a card at all. And we're doing this as a way to make sure that we're hearing from everyone in the room, and then also to follow that up with a discussion to find out a little bit more about where some of the minor changes are or where some of the potential points of disagreement are, to make sure that we have everything flushed out. So to your point again, Maria, we really want to hone in to make sure we got it right before we move forward into reflecting this information in the report. Sound good? Yes, Jeffrey. No problem.
There's pretty substantial questions about the content that you guys listed here. Like, shouldn't we review your outline and give input on that before we do a ranking exercise? Because, I mean, I can't rank something that I think doesn't reflect our work that we've actually done here.
So we're not ranking anything here.
Okay,
tonight,
well, I can't
Jeffrey.
lift a card to say whether I agree, disagree, if I fundamentally think the stuff that's on there is not reflective of the work we've done.
This is your chance to let us know. If it's not reflective, this is your chance to let us know. We've tried, Matt and I and the team, our best to characterize what we've heard. And if it's not represented again, at a very high level, if it's not represented, let us know, and we'll
Which card is that?
Red. The red. The red. It's pretty clear. The red of disagreeing. I think it's pretty clear, Jeffrey.
Okay.
So with that, if there's no other questions, we'd love to get into this exercise. I feel like we need to bring in like a yoga expert to get us all stretched out before we, right? Okay, we're definitely going home. We're definitely going home. Yes. Charlie.
Charlie at San Jose State. So before you start jumping right into this, hopefully you're going to explain the three categories so that way we, when we're talking about land use, we're not all concerned about the creek that would get into the public spaces in the third one.
Sure, yes, we will we'll give some context as well. Yep. So we're going to start with land use, and I'm handing it back to Matt.
Thanks, Dave. All right. So land use. This is the work that came out of the Land Use and Design Solution Group. We have really two topics related to this that we broke down into land use and design. A little bit arbitrary because they're so related. But for land use, what came out of the group was to maximize density to take the full advantage of the transit investments, to include a range of commercial, office, and residential uses, to incorporate ground floor retail in strategic locations and amounts, to have a coherent development pattern that is varied and interesting, yet has a consistent feel, and to be an extension of the downtown core rather than a separate district. So these were the results that we saw at a high level that came out of from the Land Use and Solution Group. Okay, so we're gonna do these all together as a group, and then we can come back and talk. You guys ready? We're doing as a group. Okay. All right. You ready? Everyone hold up ready for your cards?
Can you put up the ranking, please?
This didn't have a ranking.
Oh, this one didn't have one.
No. All right, so can hold up. Okay. Let's see. I want to start with. Do we have the number? Can we hold them up? There was one red. Get general count. So I want to just open it up, and we have a bunch of slides to move through. So what I want to get is a sense of just sort of quick comments from folks. For those who felt like there needed to be some change to this, whether you voted red or yellow, what it is that was missing. And again, I want to highlight that there were a lot of detailed comments that came out, which were solutions, which are not reflected in here, but they will be reflected in the report. Okay, so if you don't see a detail, that is potentially why. The other thing is we are going to flesh these out more in the report itself. So you're going to see more text here and more description based on the robustness of the conversation. Okay. Let's see. John, do you want to start with a comment?
Yeah, John Pettigo, PACT. Just a yellow card, just, and I know this comes up later on, but just it helps to be somewhat redundant on this point, is that just looking at preferential consideration for extremely low and low income housing or for residential use for land.
Okay, and that came up in the housing.
It came up in housing, but I think that's why I'm saying that I think it bears just,
okay.
I think it's good to have some continual emphasis on that.
And I forgot to say, 2 yellows equals a red, and 1 red means, I'm just kidding, it's not soccer. Trying to add some levity here, come on. All right, another comment, let's see.
Reginald Swilley, Minority Business Consortium. My yellow was in connection with the displacement in housing and business. Now, it might come up somewhere else, but this is a land use, that's an important aspect of it.
Great. All right, let's see. I want to get folks who haven't spoken yet.
Stephen McMahon with the San Jose Unified School District. Just a minor amendment. As a math major, maximize kind of struck me. Maybe optimize would be a better word, because obviously the maximum density could be like everybody has 2 square feet. So, I mean, like,
got it. Thank you.
You want to optimize the available land with the density.
You have just destroyed 20 years of planning career for me. Thank you. All right, Nadia.
I agree with the equity point. I also wanted to say I would have appreciated getting this earlier, or getting like a summary about the land use, because I feel like I'm making a decision in a void without really knowing like what other things were talked about, like why certain things are ranked a certain way. So I think this exercise would be more beneficial had we like gotten more information, because even some of these things I'm not really sure what they mean.
And so, thanks. I do want to say what we tried to do is we didn't create anything new here. It was all a reflection of all of the comments and all of the discussions that we've had. So it was really trying to be a summary of that. And, I apologize for that. Okay. Sorry, I can't.
Tiny amendment, just this notion of a sense of place. I don't see that anywhere in any of the categories.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure if it's your design, but this notion of east-west, going back and forth between the neighborhood to the west and downtown, so that's really reflective of.
Okay, tried to get that in E, but yes, I think we can clarify that. All right, Jeffrey, quick comment, and then Kevin, then we'll go on.
To A, I think there was a whole conversation, well, there's been a lot of conversation at various points, and including in the land use group, I remember in the notes, and when it came to the full group about value capture. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, I don't know if there was a nuance between, when we talk about density, different types of use. I know there's been talk about supporting dense housing, certainly, but I think when we're talking about the commercial development, there was a substantial conversation about how, if we are going to upzone, how are we capturing that value, which is a pretty important policy point for this whole discussion here that I'm kind of not seeing reflected. Like if it's just, hey, let's just let Google or whomever build as densely as they like because that's the value, that runs in pretty strong conflict with all the conversations we've been having about value capture.
Okay, Kevin.
Kevin Chrisman, Gardner Neighborhood Association.
maybe I've been looking ahead too much, but I know that in some of these other areas, they have like in housing, what, you know, you have for the station area and then citywide. And so I think we need to make the designation that for the land use that we're talking specifically for the station area as opposed to the downtown area or something.
Good point, yes, thank you. Dave and I just had a quick sidebar. I wonder whether it would be helpful for us to read through all of them first so that you can see the full range of what's here. And then we can come back and read through them again and then have the voting conversation. Because what we want to try and do is not have the same point in everywhere throughout it. We want to have it in there once and make it clear. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to hand the mic to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we're moving on to design. This was part of the land use discussion. We broke it out into two separate sections. We talked a lot about design and promoting a human scale design. We gave some examples of what that means, looking at height and scale of ground floors, placement of signage and entries, sidewalks, furniture, and overall walkability, really making it pedestrian oriented. We talked about the design of a tech campus that should be open and permeable so that it's integrated with its surroundings, and that employees support local businesses so they're not just staying insular within that development, but they're out actually fraternizing around the area. Ensure that new development has an appropriate interface with existing neighborhoods and mitigates impacts such as related traffic, transit routes, and noise. D is integrate public art and historic preservation early into the project design and plan implementation to enhance and protect existing character and identity. And lastly is to encourage new buildings to create an interesting skyline. And we heard a lot about changing roof lines and changing height so that it's not all one height across an entire development. So as Matt mentioned, I'm going to go through them all now so you can see what's mentioned in each one of these there and see maybe where the connections are, and then we'll come back and we'll do some voting. I'll keep going, Matt. I'll give you a break. So public spaces. This covered parks, open space, plazas, and trails. You'll see some other connectivity measures that we talk about in transportation as well that could relate here, so I'll go through these quickly. A is to ensure spaces are safe, visible, well-maintained, and accessible to everyone. B is design an interconnected network of green fingers. We heard that come up fairly often with inviting pedestrian and bicycle facilities, with link the Guadalupe River and the Los Altos Creek Trail System, daylight Los Altos Creek at Park Avenue to restore habitat and allow continuous trail systems. Next was to integrate a range of public spaces, types, and variety of scales, so pocket parks, rooftop gardens, plazas, linear parks. That kind of had that sustainability component that was popped up both in the land use and in this topic. D is ensure areas are activated in both short and long term with no dead zones through temporary and permanent programming such as public art, pop-up retail, and events. Again, kind of those short wins, trying to show temporary improvements and how that could change and innovate and enliven an area and then maybe become a long-term permanent fix. And then lastly is utilize partnerships with the business community and neighborhood groups to advance projects, implement programming, and keep spaces maintained. Okay, next, transportation. So again, there might be some connections between this and the other topics, but we'll read through this and we'll come back and do some voting. So design pedestrian-friendly streets with small blocks, safe crossings, wide sidewalks, and amenities such as street trees and benches. You might have heard some of that before in the previous topic. Direct street, trail, and bike connections to downtown, adjacent neighborhoods, and the regional network. Support a high-quality transit system that is affordable, convenient, and frequent. Design transit infrastructure to avoid impacts at homes, parks, businesses, and community facilities. E is improve the safety of major intersections, especially the Bird Avenue 280 interchange. F is minimize traffic congestion during construction and on adjacent residential streets. And G is to strive to meet city goals for reducing car travel. Matt, don't go far. You're going to get it back here soon. Next is parking, which was kind of a subtopic underneath the transportation that we broke out separately because that did come out under the transportation and land use topics. A, manage the supply of parking relative to demand, adapting to changes in travel patterns over time. B is continue to implement existing parking plans and programs that were developed with community input and respond to existing needs. C is future-proof parking structures to design them to allow for repurposing if no longer needed. That was kind of related to the talk of self-driving cars and other methods that might take the need away for parking in the future, or maybe as much parking. Minimize the amount of land dedicated to single-use parking and ensure that parking is not visually prominent, a prominent aspect of the built environment. Your turn.
Housing. Maximize residential density. Sorry, we had maximized density again. And so to clarify, this is for the Diridon Station area. We've divided this one up. So this is for the Diridon Station area. Maximize residential density to provide housing opportunities for local workers and commuters. Ensure that at least 25% of housing units are offered at below market rates for low-income households, ranging from extremely low to moderate. Build inclusionary housing units on-site rather than paying in lieu fees or build off-site. Avoid direct and indirect displacement of existing residents within the Diridon Station area and nearby neighborhoods. And then E, provide compensation and relocation assistance if redevelopment of existing housing occurs. And this is for citywide desired outcomes, housing citywide. We should leverage this process as an opportunity to address the regional housing crisis. We should generate more affordable housing throughout the city, focusing on urban villages. While the city has some programs and policies to help fight displacement, it should develop more and stronger tools. The strategy for addressing housing issues should integrate homeless services. The ultimate goal is no direct or indirect displacement from San Jose and no increase in homelessness. Okay, jobs and education for the Diridon Station area. A, ensure that new jobs offer living wages to cover the cost of housing in San Jose and reduce the potential need to commute long distances. B, provide employment and business opportunities that benefit long-time, low-income residents. C, support new development that helps diversify San Jose's economy such that residents of all skill and educational levels have more opportunities. And D, protect and support small local businesses. Jobs and education citywide. Mitigate impacts to local businesses and nonprofits that are experiencing rising rents and wages and must compete with tech companies for labor and space. B, support career pipelines that offer meaningful opportunities for existing residents and youth to get good jobs in the tech industry and other high-paying, high-growth sectors. C, explore economic development and educational strategies we have a typo here. Economic development and educational strategies should focus on strengthening existing programs over creating new ones. Okay. Let's go back. Now we're on design. Okay. Now, was that helpful to go through all of them to get the full flavor? I see some head nods. Good. Sorry, we didn't do that at first. All right. How about we take a second and go through the design here? You guys ready to, now that you again have the full picture, you ready to give your sort of direction, overall general direction on whether you think we hit the mark for design or not? Are you guys looking a little? Yeah, okay, ready to vote. Okay. Cards up, please. Okay, so a couple just really quick, should we do comments? Quick comments here? Yeah, and we have a few. Okay, 2 abstentions. Okay, All right, so just a couple comments either on, why you felt this was on the mark or why you felt like it was, or where we missed some things. And so again, let's try and be really quick so we can go through. Pilar?
So for me, really quickly, I think it makes it makes sense for us to mention something about human scale design for people of all abilities. I think there is an assumption that it's always for able-bodied people, and we need to be conscious of that.
Okay, good. Kevin?
Okay, real quick. Encourage new buildings to create an interesting skyline. It would be in direct conflict with, the maximized density to take full advantage of transit investments. Because if you go to the maximum density, you're going to get a Borg cube, right? You're not going to get an interesting.
We talked about that, not necessarily, and so I think there's a tension there.
Yeah.
Agreed, there's a tension, and we think there's ways around it from a design perspective. That's what Tim Root and his team are going to have to figure out through the design guidelines.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy, Delmas Park. When we talked about the public art and the historic preservation, we did want to have a broader definition of what historic was. And so maybe it could say public art and cultural.
Cultural and historic.
Add cultural with historic.
All right. Let's see. Nicole, and then John, then we'll move on.
I voted green, but I just wanted to say that I really support the idea of maximizing density. I was just in Seattle last weekend, and being there, I was so overwhelmed. Like, this is a city that deserves tech. This is a city that can build right. And, sorry, I'm a little sick, so my voice is all weird. But I think that we need to maximize density, to maximize housing, to maximize opportunity.
Stephen's getting very upset. We are optimizing density.
Maximize.
Okay, John.
John Pettigo, PACT. I just want to say Kathy said exactly what I was going to bring up. There's a lot of Latinos and Chicano history in the area, and I think we just need to honor that, and it needs to be part of the landscape as well.
Okay, great. Harvey, I'm sorry.
Harvey Darnell, North Will Glen. A couple things. One Rosalind talked about a little bit, downtown having a design guideline to make it pedestrian friendly with the businesses. So we talk about putting the proper human scale, but we don't have the interaction with the street. So somewhere we need to get an interaction with the street, because right now San Jose feels like a suburban campus.
That's what A is trying to get at, but I think we can be clear
I think
about
it needs some more
Fair enough.
verbiage.
Yep.
The second thing on the public art, was that it? Someone mentioned public art. I didn't think that was. I'm sorry?
D.
Okay. One of the problems we had was with the historic signs, because they're not art, we need some kind of verbiage that allows that to be added to that.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is public spaces. Get your cards ready. Okay, cards up, please. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Great. Let's take a few comments. I want to actually ask if anyone who hasn't commented yet and said anything today wants to comment. I'm giving you first dibs at this point and later on as well. Okay. Cards up, please. Oh. Let's see. Norma?
In regards to the Los Gatos Creek, not only did we talk about daylighting it, but we also talked about making development face the creek as well, and being part of that, not just a part of a trail system standing alone.
Yes, correct. We did. Okay, going down. Leslie?
I'd like to add F to enhance the riparian habitat along Guadalupe River and Los Gatos Creek.
Can you say that again?
Yeah.
So we can get it recorded? And not just recorded.
All right, to enhance the riparian habitat along Los Gatos Creek and Guadalupe River.
Okay, thank you. Kathy?
And I'd like to recommend that we add bathrooms in there.
Not in the creek.
That was not in F, correct? Okay, Harvey.
Under Harvey Darnell, North Willow Glen, under trails, we say you link Guadalupe River and Los Gatos Creek. We also have the Three Creeks Trail, which just opened this last weekend. Second thing is, I also talked a lot about creating community gardens, urban agriculture, and on rooftops, wherever we could find spaces, and there's no mention of that here.
Okay, I think those are coming in the more detail, but we'll make sure of that.
We'll make sure that they're emphasized.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
That's all in C? That's C, pocket parks, rooftops, plazas, linear parks. So we actually had that in there. Pilar?
So I echo the comment about activating spaces vertically and not just kind of at street level, so urban gardens and parks on top of the roofs. And then another thing, not taking it for granted and actually spelling out that the public spaces should reflect the cultural diversity of the community.
Okay, good points. And I like that term, vertical activation of space. I think it's a good kind of high-level desired outcome term. All right. Anyone else? Cards down if you're, Kathy, card down?
Sorry.
That's okay. I get confused easily. All right, let's, transportation. What? Okay, you ready? Skim it through again. All right, ready? Okay, let's. Okay. All right, so some comments on this. Where were we on and where were we off?
You need to ask about who abstained.
Oh, and we had abstentions. I think we counted, did we count those? Yes, we got them. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Did you have a comment? Okay, just that. Some comments. Oh, sorry, I couldn't see. Shiloh.
For G, says strive to meet citywide goals for reducing car travel, which is wonderful. And I'd love to see it stronger, going back to my wonderful presentation, those presentations that we all did. One of the things that I mentioned was we have citywide goals. This area can and should be going way beyond that, because it's going to need to bring the rest of the city up in order for us to be able to meet our citywide goals.
So if that were rephrased to make it more aggressive in this area. Optimize. Okay, Melissa.
Just wanted to make sure that we added.
Can you actually name and speak in the name organization?
Oh, yes, Melissa Reggiardo with Caltrain. I wanted to make sure that we mentioned the need to provide transit capacity for the future, which I think is important in terms of planning a station for the future. And then also I was hoping we could emphasize the incredible opportunity for transit interconnectedness that we have here, not only with the eventual coming of BART and high-speed rail, but also the opportunity for better existing services, including Caltrain, ACE, Capital Corridor, VTA Light Rail, bus, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Edward.
Edward Salm, Shasta Henshaw Park Neighborhood Association. Melissa covered some of them. Futures capacity, the DISC concept, especially emphasizing last mile towards getting to transit. And one thing, kind of an iteration on B, there's been talk about, especially around Diridon Station itself, some have advocated raising the tracks as a way to potentially address some concerns. That in of itself creates other concerns for those immediately adjacent to it. So kind of there are pros and cons to each iteration of that, and I think that's something that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and actually an example of something we didn't want to get into detail on in a guiding, in a desired outcome. God, I almost said the wrong word. In a desired outcome, because these are outcomes that we want, which is impact, not solution, about how we go about do that. Okay, thank you. Harvey.
It was Harvey Darnell in North Willow Glen. It was alluded to just a few seconds ago, and you alluded to it also. But I think we need to make sure that we. I think we need to make sure that we integrate the Caltrain and high-speed rail, VTA, whatever part, et cetera, at Diridon Station, so that we have the full capacity and we don't make design guidelines that have to change in 20 years.
Thank you. Okay, as expected, we're putting this up here and getting a lot of great feedback, and we knew we weren't going to get it right, so we appreciate it. All right, let's move on to, do we have any other comments? Charlotte already commented. Parking. Okay, you ready? Okay, vote. Okay. Okay, comments. Comments, again, anyone who hasn't spoken much gets preference. Yes. You have like 12 minutes right now.
So Charlie at San Jose State. So I happen to be on the parking board for downtown as well, so just full disclosure there. With this station being where it is and with the draw it's going to have of people going out of the area, there needs to be a parking garage someplace around this area, dedicated for Caltrain, high-speed rail, all that, not to mention, the Sharks and the arena having the events, for 150 events a year, there's got to be parking. And right now, there is not a solution for that.
Okay, thank you. Stephen.
Stephen McMahon with the San Jose Unified School District, and just very briefly to preface.
Hold on 1 second. Can you guys hear? No. Okay. We're going to pass the microphone because the
Stephen
smaller mics
McMahon
aren't
with
working
the
so
San Jose
well.
Unified School District. Just very briefly to give context to my comments throughout the night. There's a difference between poetry and recommendations. I just feel it's important to get these as accurate as possible because people who aren't in this room and who read it 5 years later, they don't have the context of the conversation. And for this one, I voted yellow mainly because I'm nervous about relative to demand and if needed. My sense is that we want to change people's behaviors regarding to using cars. And if we continue to build parking based on demand, we're likely to just need more parking always, and that there isn't enough of a forcing function to get people out of their cars. So if we're intentionally designing a transit hub to get people out of their cars, we might intentionally design less parking than the current demand and always a little bit less to force people to rethink the car trip. So that stood out to me, that the demand may always exceed the supply, which means you'll never decrease parking spaces.
Right. And I thank you. I love that you guys read into this when in a way that we didn't when we read it and when we wrote it. So again, thanks. Okay, let's see, Shiloh.
I just want to underscore what was just said. That was poetic and profound. Thank you. And then I also want to make, kind of building on something that you said, in the future, will people know what we're talking about when they look back on this? And I'll make kind of a snarky comment, and that is parking for who? We may look back on this in just 5 years and say, well, who are they talking about? Because nobody drives cars anymore. We might say that 5 years from now. So anyway, either we say desired outcomes dash parking for cars, because this is what this is about. Or then the other question I would ask is, under which desired outcomes are we talking about parking for all the other things that need parking?
We need scooter parking now that we didn't a year ago. Pretty much when we started this process, we didn't need scooter parking, and now we do. Yeah, shouldn't be, but we won't get into that. All right.
But then accessibility issues.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, Nicole, and then Ken.
Again, Hello?
There you go, that's good.
Hello.
Only use one.
Okay. Again, I voted green on this, but I just wanted to take an opportunity to highlight this is why we need to maximize density, because if we maximize density at transportation hubs, then we'll have more accessibility to get places and use cars less. So really support this. Maximize density to maximize transportation use.
Ken.
Hello, Ken Caveney, SAP Center. Again, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I want to...
Can you hold on 1 second?
Thank you. Yeah. Ken Caveney, SAP Center. I want to emphasize, and this may come up in the design guidelines aspect, but having shared use parking as part of the design guidelines, I think would be an important element, so that as parking is constructed, that would be able to be shared for the multiple uses. Appreciate the comments for Charlie and others. SAP Center does promote shared use parking as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward.
Edward Psalm, Shasta Hanchett Park Neighborhood Association. One of the things that I'd mentioned was what Ken just mentioned, the legislative requirement to address the concept of shared parking, so parking can be used for different reasons over a 24-hour period, where it isn't just dedicated for individual uses or buildings. And the other, a clarification on B, it was clear, it wasn't continue to implement. By my memory, it was don't throw them out, because a lot of data and community input has gone into existing parking plans. But it also wasn't, don't take them as gospel, because even just in the last few years, there have been enough changes that we can't take the data then as a given. So don't pretend that community outreach and community input hasn't happened regarding parking before, but don't say that, oh, we've already covered this, we don't need to re-examine this.
And I feel like that's actually a higher level comment for lots of topics and not just parking. And maybe we need to elevate it from that, which is respect the work that's been done and build on it. Probably do that and we can get rid of that one. All right. Okay, Boris. See if that works.
Boris Levin, high-speed rail. I think one point to add, and building up on something that Stephen and others have echoed, but...
Actually, Boris, can you hold on?
Okay. Boris Levin with high-speed rail. I think one point to add, and this gets into some of the points that Stephen and others have made, but proactively managing parking, not just managing it, but proactively being that constantly looking at that question, and then there's a tie-in between that one and the striving to meet citywide goals of reducing car travel, and so using that as one of the mechanisms in the toolkit.
Norma Camacho, Santa Clara Valley Water District. I think that there was some discussion also in regards to parking in terms of impacting local neighborhoods with cars not finding spaces and then parking in the adjacent neighborhoods, and I don't think that's really reflected here.
All right, let's move on to the next topic, which is housing for the Diridon Station area. Give you a chance to just read it quickly for a second, and then, okay, y'all ready? Okay. Cards up, please. Okay, does everyone have their cards up? Okay, hold them up. Okay, great. Not as much agreement on this. Let's get some comments. Maybe we'll start kind of, who wants to, if you want to make a comment on this, if you could raise your card now, that would be appreciated. No, Pilar, other card. Name tag. Okay, let's start. We'll start with Pilar.
Thank you. So the main comment that I wanted to raise was on A. I would strongly suggest that we reword this for the following ways, or with consideration 2 ways. Number one, maximize residential density to provide housing affordability across all incomes. So we're talking about housing opportunity for all consistently. Number two, I have a fairly strong objection to the word local workers, because I think we need to be thinking about this process as in terms of like what we're trying to get to in the future. So I think that we should have language in there that reflects kind of current and future residents and workers so that it's not extremely limiting. And then we raised, for at least personally, I raised this at the housing working group. I think the idea of indirect displacement is something that we really need to think about and talk about and define a little bit better, so that there's, right now I feel like it's hard to really know what that means and what the solutions are gonna look like, so it's hard to say either way how strongly we could support or suggest revisions to that.
Thank you, Pilar. Stephen?
Stephen McMahon with the Sinners Unified School District. 2 comments. The 25% goal, I understand why there's a specific number, but if we looked at how many members of the current workforce are extremely low to moderate, and should we benchmark the availability of housing to that number? So 2 extreme examples, if 50% of the current workforce cannot afford market rate, 25% is still going to result in a lot of displacement. If only 10% couldn't afford it, 25% is an over-allocation of below market rate. So is there a way to more index it relative to what people are actually earning? And then there's housing that works with that, as opposed to a rigid number that, at least when I read it on the text, seems blind to the actual number of people. To my second point is, I think, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, that the consensus is to avoid displacement of the low and moderate income people, and that the intent of the group is not to provide compensation to someone who owns a $5 million house and for some reason is displaced. I am nervous that if we read this 5 to 10 years from now and we say no displacement throughout, is that really the intent? I mean, if Willow Glen got high density and some of the people were displaced from Willow Glen for higher density neighborhoods, would this group object to that? And I think that's a very important point to make. When you say no displacement, it literally means people who have acres of home ownership would potentially never have an eminent domain that gets a higher density housing because of the right next to a high-speed rail train station, right? I think good public policy would say you can't have a 10-acre home next to the high-speed rail station because we need an urban village there. You might get displaced. Does that make sense? That is zero displacement in all circumstances overreaching?
So can I actually, I think it's a really important, oh, sorry. I think it's a really important question, and I actually want to hear, can anyone give a couple responses to that? Because it's a fascinating question, and it is not something I've heard much discussion of with this group.
The specific example of the airport, we did do displacement to build the airport. I mean, there are reasons you do displacement because the entire city benefits.
But if I understand what you said, it's that its displacement is tied to an income range.
That is my sense of the group's comments throughout these meetings, is that we're focused on ensuring low and moderate income families have the ability to live here. And we're a little less concerned about the $10 million McMansion and the displacement to maybe an urban village instead of the McMansion.
Okay, I want to try something here. This may not work. We're going to use our cards again. So if you agree with that statement, a green card. If you're not sure, yellow. And if you disagree, red. And we're... So...
It's a little bit of a silly, sorry, Jeffrey with working partnerships. I appreciate that's a worthwhile discussion about how do we define displacement, but without any discussion, we're going to cards?
Yes. And we're just going to do this really quickly, and then we can have a little discussion about it. I'm curious what people are thinking.
Question, do we care about McMansion? Well, the wealth being displaced.
Is displacement tied to a certain income level, or is it across all income levels? That's the question. Do you guys?
Do we agree with him?
I mean, like, with all this, I feel like Stephen's playing it.
So I think we're actually spending more time on whether we should have a conversation about it
Right,
than.
so then I think I don't,
let's not have it.
Okay, so I'm going to say we're going to have it because we're going to do it really quickly, and then we're going to move on from this. Okay? So cards, do you agree or disagree? I'm going to restate it again, and then we're going to move on. I didn't want this to be a big thing. I thought it was an interesting question. No, let me just keep going with this for a second, Stephen, if I could. Is displacement tied to a lower income bracket, or can all income brackets, should they be, are they part of this displacement discussion?
So agree is agree.
But eminent domain doesn't
So,
exist.
sorry, okay. So it
they're not.
is only for the lower income brackets.
Yes.
That displacement is only for the low income brackets and not across all income brackets.
Can I make a point of clarification? I heard him say lower and middle income.
Okay, lower and middle income.
Correct? Is that what you said?
It says extremely low to moderate. We seem to be focused on that group, but then later on we say no displacement.
Okay, so the extremely low to moderate, is it only extremely low to moderate? If you agree or disagree?
If it's only extremely low and moderate, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Is only extremely low and moderate to green, or across all? Okay. So a difference of opinion. That's fine. Thanks. Let's move on from that. Let's see, Nadia.
I can't even remember what my point was.
We can come back to you.
I have a
It's fine.
point to piggyback off of that.
What was that?
I have a point to piggyback off of
Well-
Stephen McMahon's point.
Okay. Why don't we go? We'll go to you first, and then we'll move back. So
Not to
Nicole.
be. First of all, eminent domain doesn't exist anymore. So a property owner can only choose to sell their property. And as we've seen in the Silicon Valley, property owners favor immensely. My partner and I have owned a property in 2 years, and it's already accrued $250,000. Like, no, this doesn't exist for wealthy people or property owners. This displacement is just for renters.
Okay, that's fine. We had the conversation. Let's see, John.
I think that this is John Pedigo packed. I just want to just kind of echo Pilar's concern as well about, and then also part of what Stephen's talking about is the 25%. I'm primarily concerned about the displacement of very low income and extremely low income.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Charlie.
I just wanted to say I was a part of this working group, and when this was said, no displacement, I was one of a few people in the room, maybe the only person in the room, said, gee, no is pretty absolute. So I just wanted to underscore, I think the fundamental concept of whether we agree or not on no always, and then also if it is no, who that no applies to, is actually a really important thing for us to come to a decision on at a high level.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Maria.
Maria Noel Fernandez with Silicon Valley Rising. I think there are several details that are within the ranking that, just to say, I will submit after this meeting. One that is, I think, incredibly important, and I don't see here, I'm looking through here, I don't see the word gentrification anywhere, and it was something that came up several times. And I just want to underscore something that Stephen said, and I think someone else echoed, of just these details and words matter. And so I will go through point by point and submit this after in terms of the housing elements, but I do want to just suggest that this is a key area that needs fine comb going through and going through the details, because what's here is horribly inadequate.
Okay. Nadia?
Yeah, to echo Maria Noel's point, that was what I was going to say, is it doesn't match with what the rankings said. And it says avoid displacement, and I think the group had zeroed in on no displacement, like whether that's low income or moderate income, like we can talk about that later, but I think we're not avoiding displacement, we don't want any displacement.
Okay. Jeffrey?
Yeah, just a
microphone, please.
Yep, Jeffrey Buchanan, Working Partnerships.
Can you actually use the handheld
Oh,
mic?
sorry there.
It's
Apologies.
work better.
All right, he's on now. Jeffrey Buchanan, Working Partnerships.
Yeah, just to the earlier points, one first question. In your earlier diagram, it was laid out that there was a Google bucket, a citywide bucket, or no, a Google bucket, a Dearden Station area bucket, and a citywide bucket. We had pretty lengthy discussions about each of those three kind of tracks of recommendations, and I'm not seeing in here where the Google track of those conversations are, which again is the whole point of this, how this exercise began. So it'd be good to hear your reaction to that question. And then just, when we look at the top 5 instance discussion points from there, which I think are pretty reflective of where the bulk of the conversation in the solution group was, we're not seeing reflected in here a discussion about creating a fund for the acquisition and rehabilitation and preservation of housing. In fact,
That, just to interrupt quickly, that's an idea that's a solution, and it's a specific thing like a fund.
Okay, let me finish my point though. So that, the fact that then you have C that says that inclusionary housing on site is preferred to in lieu fees, and while, as a singular statement, I would say, yeah, that's correct, but then that comes in conflict with the #1 ranking solution that we said would be to create a fund that in fact could invest beyond Dearden Station. And so that's my earlier point today, that like, you really need to look at where these top rank, and we can submit written comments that'll be better than wasting everyone's time here, but there's just so many contradictions between these points, which in and of themselves, maybe without any context, generally things maybe that were said, maybe even things people agree with. But then the coherence is just not there, and it in fact undercuts, I think, the recommendations to put forward these desired outcomes on the front end that don't represent where the bulk of the conversation was. And so when council reads this, they're going to get a much different interpretation about what was actually said and where the energy was in the room than what's on paper here, even though these statements in and of themselves in a bubble maybe are not bad ideas. And so I think there's just a lot of work that needs to go in here.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, really, the top 5 recommendations, there's those kind of contradictions, and that's just really troublesome for the amount of time that me and others spend in this solutions group to see this.
Okay, John.
Oh, I've already said.
Oh, okay, sorry. Norma, you, and then we're going to move on to the next topic.
Norma Camacho, Santa Clara Valley Water District. I think we should add something about the preservation of the character of neighborhood housing in this list as well.
All right.
And Harvey Darnell, Northfield, is it on?
No.
Harvey Darnell, Northfield. On the 25% of housing units, I think we really need to make sure we understand what the number of jobs that Google brings in and the number of support workers that will be needed to support those workers, and we provide enough housing somewhere in the area so that those people can get there. Everywhere I go now, retail, restaurants, bakeries, wherever, they all have help wanted signs because they can't get enough workers because no one can afford to live on the pay that's there.
All right. Next, citywide housing. And I think that some of the comments before about the statement about no direct or indirect displacement, it came up here as a citywide level. Maybe it should have been in the other bucket. Okay, should we do our quick vote here? Okay. Let's see. 2 reds. Okay. So let's get some comments again. If a comment has been made, again, we've heard that you feel like it's not reflective. You can say it again, but we're certainly willing to take more comments in writing later as well. So any other what other comments do you guys want to make about citywide housing here? Pilar.
So really quick, under item A, I would suggest a revision to include city and regional housing crisis. in acknowledgement of the role that the city of San Jose needs to play. B, there was lots of discussion around affordable housing throughout the city, on urban villages as well as on publicly owned land.
Okay. Stephen, let's get a microphone down to you.
Steve McMahon with the San Jose Unified School District. Definitely reiterating the same point, but it's exactly what Shiloh said. I wasn't making a policy statement. I'm trying to clarify what the intent is, and if the ultimate goal is no, I read that as no one will be displaced, meaning a lot of other things may be sacrificed for that goal. And on behalf of the school district, I'm definitely charged with advocating for the lower income families as the priority. If building housing for low income families resulted in displacement of high income families, I think many of our communities would support that. Again, it's not a policy statement, it's clarifying, writing the statement, the ultimate goal is no. If the city council were to adopt a phrase like that, they literally would then be testing everything against no one ever moves out of San Jose. And it is exactly what you said. What does that statement really mean to people when they read it and they're not sitting in this room? I think everyone in this room understands we're talking about lower income families and working people.
Okay. Jeffrey?
Yeah, the Jeffrey Buchanan Working Partnerships. I mean, generally, Stephen, I think I would agree with that. I think with the Google project in particular, which is where that particular statement was addressed to, in the group, I think the idea was there really is no accountability mechanism for, we would like to see Google make a commitment with a plan for implementing that goal around ensuring that there's no displacement as a part of this project. I mean, generally, yes, we're talking about working class families, we're talking about lower income families. I don't think, I would have to see what it looks like, but I don't think I would be comfortable with, giving Google, going to Sacramento to be able to get eminent domain powers for some kind of authority to allow Google to move forward on things. That's not on the table, it's not in debate, so I set that aside. But I think this was really about, when we're kind of getting away from it, is Google willing to say, as a part of this development, they agree to no displacement in a plan to ensure that there's no displacement? That's really what we're trying to get to here. And so I think that's a more important thing, and unfortunately there's no vessel for that in this outline. And then just around A, I mean, yes, even with working partnerships, we do a ton of work around regional housing, but just want to make sure that, within the group, we had a pretty robust conversation that yes, we need to address this as a region, that shouldn't, yes, we need to do that, but we shouldn't say that and then defer on looking at what specifically Google's accountability and what their responsibility to address that in connection to this project looks like. Yes, let's do that. We're all engaged. A lot of us spend a lot of time there, but let's not put that out there as a rationale for, hey, let's let these guys off the hook. So.
And I think that your statement is correct. We do have to do more work about where each of these statements fall within those buckets. And so I think there's definitely more work to do there. Okay, John.
John Pettigo Pact. I think that just a couple things. One is that we should, when it says A, we should leverage this process, it's really not the process we're leveraging, but leveraging the opportunity of massive development. I think we need to be very clear. It's not about the process, but about the impact of massive development and its impact citywide. I also would like us to, it's a generally very weak statement and under design outcomes for citywide. I would like us to call out specifically low income, extremely low income families.
Okay, thanks. Norma and then Kevin, and then let's move on to the last set of topics.
Norma Camacho, Santa Clara Valley Water District. And I just wanted to just get clarification as well, what we really mean as displacement. Because you could get displaced from your neighborhood to the further south or east or west of San Jose and feel just as displaced that you got sent off to Santa Cruz County or South County. And so I'm just wondering, what does displacement mean? Are you talking about your immediate vicinity for your neighborhood? Are you talking about displacement from transit hubs? What are we talking about here? We should be specific.
All right, Kevin?
Okay, yeah. I kind of like what you had to say there, Norma. in that Kevin Chrisman, Gardner Neighborhood Association. Gardner is really unique in that we can walk to downtown San Jose, we can walk to the Shark Tank, we can walk to downtown Willow Glen. If you move us, there's no place you're going to move us that we can do those same things. The other thing I wanted to make my main point is I'm beginning to see this to be a bit of a class war, because a lot of the people in Gardner have owned their homes for, say, 3-4 generations. So they bought a long time ago at very low housing prices, stayed there for years, raised their families, give it to their kids, that sort of thing. There's no way, if these people were able to, if they lost their homes now, there's no way they'd be able to buy that same home anywhere else in San Jose. They would have to move out of the area. So even though they are low income, they may be house rich, but they're cash poor. And so you're creating a situation here where if you move people out of the nearby neighborhoods through displacement, they're going to have to go to Los Banos or anywhere else like anybody else. So it's, I think that some of the comments I hear are kind of disarming to me, because it shows a bit of class warfare, and I don't like that. I mean, it's displacement is displacement, whether you have no money or a whole bunch of money. I just kind of, I'm just kind of at a loss for words on some of that, and I'm kind of disappointed in the group that they would stoop to that class war thing.
Okay. Kevin, thanks for the comments. Okay. I think we have everyone's comments for this. Let's move on to our last section. I think we have 4 or 5 public comments, public comment cards. If you haven't handed in a card, please, please do so. Oh, yeah. This was a, thanks. I was trying to get people, if they haven't done the card, to come on up and do it. So jobs and education, let's get a sense of direction here first, and then some comments. Okay, more reds with this one. So everyone who is going to vote, please do. Okay, we got them. Okay, some comments, please. Where were we? Where are we off here?
Reginald Swilly, Minority Business Consortium. I'm concerned. I've been saying this over and over. I want to ensure that there's participation in the whole construction and the economic process of developing this area of the local, small, and unengaged business communities. I want to put that, I would like for that to come out of this room, that we are concerned about the development of the, we try to move away from everybody moving in, the big companies move in, get all the money and leave. The more money that we can get to stay in San Jose, the more economic benefit for our community. Dollars turn over 7 times when we have local businesses and small businesses developing, working on some of these developments. And I would like for that to be in both the DSA and the citywide as well. That same comment.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see, Jean? Here.
Jean Cohen with the Building Trades Council, and it's late and I want to respect people's time, so we'll put most of this in writing, but just based on the solution group's conversation, I think some of the topics that are missing from the desired outcomes list are related to the construction trades industry jobs that would be building the project. I think there's some great comments here about the operations side, but I think we want to make sure that there's some language specifically that includes the word pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs, because that's the pipeline to good jobs. Thank you very much.
Let's see, Eddie, next. Thanks.
Trong from the Silicon Valley organization. Eddie Trong with the Silicon Valley organization. I just want to say that for Part A, where it says it ensures that new jobs offer living wages, I think it's premature to put some kind of a requirement that there'll be living wages without understanding the type of jobs or the types of industries that we represented. Not only will there be tech jobs in the Diridon station, there will also be service jobs, support positions, and we shouldn't be putting some kind of a requirement or a mandate ahead of time without understanding what is out there. Furthermore, there's no policy that requires that there's a specific living wage is different from minimum wage. Those two issues, there's no policy existing that requires that a living wage is mandated for a sub-region of the city of San Jose. It should be consistent citywide or regionally, but not so much as a sub-region. Those are some of my comments, and I won't hold up everybody's time. I will also offer written comments on this policy. And furthermore, if you increase a high living wage without understanding the type of jobs represented in that area, you'll also hurt small businesses that will become a part of the local community if they move into there.
Miguel?
Miguel Marquez with the County of Santa Clara. I have a concern with letter B, which is provide employment and business opportunities that benefit long-time lower-income residents. I certainly don't have a concern with benefiting lower-income residents with employment and business opportunities, but I don't understand the long-time distinction. I think whether someone's been here for a short time, for a few years, whatever, if they're lower income, they have needs. And I hate to see us divide each other by how long have you lived here.
Just to say, comments will be submitted as well. The one that I do want to lift up particularly is A, and essentially saying that the terminology of just living wages is actually not enough in terms of what we actually talked about in terms of responsible contracting standards and quality jobs and fair and safe working conditions, which was the priority for the subcommittee that was outlined, and that was a key part of the conversation. And so I want to make sure that the language in here is actually broader and more encompassing, because yes, wages are a part of it, and but it needs to be much broader than that. And I'll submit the rest in writing. Thank you.
Santa Clara Valley Water District. One thing I don't see in here is the connection between jobs and supporting local schools and how the development is going to do that for the future.
Let's go to our next one of, our last one of jobs education citywide. Okay, direction? What? Oh, sorry. Direction? Oh, that's better. Okay, cards up, please, and this is our last one here. Okay, all right, Leah, do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So again, it's directionality here. Some comments? Anything, any new? Reginald?
Yes, I would hope, this was my hope for sitting on this SAG group, is that what we are doing here will affect the whole city and everything that we do going forward around how we do business, how we set policies. And yes, I think every wage should be a living wage. I don't care what business it is, and there's been a lot of stuff coming out of the national chambers saying that these type living wage jobs help hurt small businesses, and that's just not the fact. The fact is that the more expendable income your community have, the people in San Jose will have, the better it is for small companies, small businesses. Every small business makes money off of exposable income. So I think that I hope that policy is something that we are putting in stone here. No, something that's gonna come from this committee, from this SAG group that will say, this is what we want to do in San Jose going forward. We got too many people living under the bridge that have jobs, living in their cars. Every wage should be a living wage.
Okay, thank you. Leslie.
Just real quick, it feels like we kind of ran out of steam when we got here, just as we're running out of steam tonight. I feel like there's a real strong opportunity for innovation here and innovative partnerships. We're capital Silicon Valley. We've got a long lead time running up to when Google will be putting a shovel in the dirt. Let's get innovative here. Let's set the pace for the rest of the country and show them how it's done.
Thank you. Miguel?
Miguel Marquez with the County of Santa Clara. What prompted my red car on this is C, which is explore economic development and educational strategies, or I'm sorry, that has a typo in it. It's economic development and educational strategies should focus on strengthening existing programs over creating new ones. I don't understand that. To me, we should focus on those programs that work. It doesn't matter if they're existing, if they're new, if they work, they should be our priority.
Okay, thanks. Okay. So we're going to move on to public comment. Before we do, I want to thank everyone for the comments. You know, we're moving through this process quickly. We expected a lot of comments, and we got a lot of comments, and so we want to thank you for that. You know, absolutely, if you want to write additional comments to this and submit them to us, we absolutely would welcome it. If you want to have a phone conversation about some of this, we can do that as well. Our intent here again was not to upset, but was to try and pull a lot of information together and bring it up. And we were clearly got it okay in some areas and not as well in other areas, and that's okay, because what we want to do is get it right. So now's the time to figure out where we didn't and where we did. So thanks for the comments there. I think we're going to turn it over now. I'm going to turn it over to Dave for public comments.
Okay, thank you all for sticking with us. I'm going to read off 3 names at a time. I ask you to be ready to pop up. Thank you so much. And again, excuse me if I mispronounce your name. We're going to start with Teresa Castellanos. Then we're going to go to Blair Beekman, followed by, I believe, Ishan Harrell.
Good evening, Teresa Castellanos, San Jose Unified School District Trustee. I am here to express the concerns of what is taking place in the area that I represent. I represent the downtown area. Last year, we had a discussion, on the table discussion at Lowell Elementary School. We had 25 immigrant mothers show up, and they were talking about paying $2,500 for a garage with no bathroom and no kitchen. They also talked about competing with San Jose State students, in which a landlord would rather rent to a 3-bedroom house to 6 students because they can charge $1,000 to $1,500 per student and have 2 students in each room. That's $6,000 to $8,000 a month that they are competing with as families. And so this is before Google's arrival. And a lot of the families were talking about how they're going to lose community, they were going to lose school. They could tell me off the top of their head that they had lost 100 kids that year and that they had lost 150 kids the year before. So this housing crisis is extreme. And I urge you to not only come and limit public comment to this space, but please come to Washington Elementary School. Please come to Lowell Elementary School. Please come to the schools that are being impacted by this discussion so that you can hear what families are suffering and what students are suffering. No matter what we do as a school district, we cannot make up for the socioeconomic difficulties that this new economy has created, that has created the very rich and everybody else. And I heard the discussion about middle income. There is no middle income left in Silicon Valley. There is everyone that is struggling to stay here, and then there's the very rich. And we will become San Francisco based on what you do here. This will define whether there's ethnic diversity here or not. And I think the commitment has to be more than the art, because the art will remember who we were, not who we are. The commitment has to be, how do we sustain the ethnic diversity that has given the richness and the wealth to what is Silicon Valley? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to remind you all, we have about 2 minutes per comment. We're having some technical difficulties, so Lori's going to give you a heads up as you're getting close. So we have Blair Beekman, followed by Ishan Harrell.
Thank you. 9:05. Yeah, to reiterate the words just spoken, that was very nice. That was a perspective I really need. You know my feelings about the downtown area. There's a certain gentrification process already starting with the mayor that they're already working on. And they're using technology in what I feel is the real wrong way to do it. It's got a whole bunch of things to it that, I don't want to argue about, but one of its purposes is to keep poor people out of the First and Santa Clara area, and that's not cool. That's not good. So there's questions, there's problems. As a group, you've softened your touch up a bit in how to talk about this. You're going to work on this to try to bring it back a bit, and I thank you for that. I think what you were bringing out beforehand had a very nice balance. And I have been in previous meetings where there was a certain balance that was accepted before that you've softened today, that you're going to try to bring forward, and I hope you can. They don't have to be etched in stone for the city council at this point, but a real strong list that people like from working partnerships are working on, I think is a real good commitment and a real strong understanding of what we really want to develop, and I think that can be okay. Just a few more thoughts. I'm really worried about, I guess just to mention the idea of Google is important to me. Maybe it's time they become a bit more involved in this process. And finally, one of your first sentences was maximum density to take full advantage of transit investments. I'm a bit worried that you are going to, with your transit investments, you're going to, that's just too front and center. The transit industry group, BTAs and such, are a bit too strong. Just one more second if you can help me here. They're a bit too strong right now. They need to learn how to back off a bit, and we need to respect that about them and build them up with time. And they're pushed too strong right now. They need to learn to back off. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. So the next 3 are Ishan Harrell, Robert Aguirre, and Tessa Wood-Mancy. It looks like Ishan may have left, so we'll go to Robert Aguirre.
Hey, Robert Aguirre here, and I believe I'm a voice for houseless individuals throughout the city and the county. I would like to point out that we have 10 neighborhood associations here, one of which is Downtown Residents, which has 3 representatives. One of them is not here, who also happens to represent the houseless people in the city in this process. And when you were all conducting your votes, that vote was missing. And this is the second time that I've talked about, actually the third time I've talked about this. And everyone else, I believe, has an alternate, that if you can't make it here, you have somebody that can take your place. We don't have an alternate for the houseless people here. We don't have a voice. And I think that that is something that's very sadly missing here, because there are people that are going to be severely impacted by whatever happens out of this. And I brought this up before, like I said, and I think we need to have an alternate. It doesn't necessarily have to be me. I would love it if it was me, because I do go out to the encampments all the time. I do talk to people. I do exchange ideas with what's going on here, explain to them about how they're being affected by this, and I listen to them. There's no one else here that's doing that. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Tessa Wood-Mancy, followed by Larry Ames, and then Shari Klenhouse.
Hi, I'm Tessa Wood-Mancy. And one of the things that I was been thinking about is how Google can be helping our community. And I was thinking of a comparison of Cisco. My husband works for Cisco, and how they just recently spent like $50 million for homeless. And so I want Google to really help with our roads to make them more pedestrian and bicycle friendly, and the whole network of roads around the Diridon station area. So we're talking about Stockton, we're talking about Taylor all the way to Winchester. We're talking about Julian, that currently, as it goes eastbound, is not even what is it called? Accessible, ADA accessible, because I saw the guy with the pot, that was selling, ice cream. He had to walk down Julian because there's no way with his little cart that he could go down because there's stairs. So it isn't even ADA accessible eastbound Julian. And then, of course, Coleman and also the Alameda. And they all need to be bicycle friendly and pedestrian friendly, and also traffic calming. So all these streets that we want them to work on. And then I was thinking even Bird, like we talked about 280, but it's really Bird has been coming up a lot, and we need to get all these streets to be worked out so they're pedestrian and bicycle friendly and traffic calming. And so that's what I say that Google has to do. But it should be all companies that are building in our neighborhood should have a like we have the parkland fees. We should have traffic and the bike lanes and making our roads more bicycle and pedestrian friendly as part of all companies that come into our neighborhood should have that. We should have that as a fund that is developed. And they say that that they only have to deal with what's in front. That's what developers have told us, only have to deal with what's in front of their building. Well, that's wrong. It needs to be the whole network of everything, not only Google, but all the developers need to be looking at like I say, a fee, like the parkland fees, that goes into developing our streets to be more bicycle and pedestrian friendly and traffic calming. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Larry Ames, followed by Shawnee Kleinhaus, followed by Janibe. Hope I got that right.
So hi, I'm concerned about how you're trying to maximize the housing. Yes, the area overall has a housing shortage, but San Jose itself has a surplus. It's a bedroom community. I've been going to these various budget meetings, and I keep on hearing about how there's 0.8 jobs per employed resident here. San Jose actually has too many houses. What we want to emphasize here is the employment. We need to help solve San Jose's structural budget imbalance. Otherwise, we can't pay for the police and parks and libraries and so forth. Our transit system here is fixed up as a hub and spokes. So Diridon, all the tracks lead to Diridon. So you want to have the employment there, have housing out on the spokes. People come in from Sunnyvale, people come in from Milpitas, and also from all the urban villages that you'd be building. You have the housing out there and have them come into the area here. If you put a lot of housing at Diridon, they're just going to get on high-speed rail, or they're going to get on the Caltrain or BART and go up to San Francisco. So, I mean, you could build incredible amount of housing, and you'd still have the housing problem because they just go up to San Francisco for the jobs, leaving us with the bills to pay for the parks and libraries. You do want to have some housing, because if it's all just employment, then it's a dead area at night. So you want to have a vibrant mix. Some of the other things, I've been also to high-speed rail meetings. I keep on hearing about how you want to connect to the San Jose airport. I haven't heard any mention of that here. You want to have parking at the airport, have the parking lots, rental cars up there, and have people commute there rather than having parking at the airport, at the Diridon station area here. I've heard no mention of San Jose State University. A lot of people will be walking from there to here. You want to make it so people will want to walk through the areas and come here. You want to make it so people can walk to the transit station. I have not heard the connections to the place, just how to get to the train station. You want to emphasize that too. Make it, you're saying it's a beautiful area, but make it so they can get there. And I am very glad to hear you talking about the Los Gatos Creek and the daylighting it. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 4 remaining: Shawnee Kleinhaus, Janipe, I'm so sorry for mispronouncing that, and Adna Levy.
Can somebody take this down? Thank you. So I wanted to thank Norma and Leslie for mentioning the creeks. And the creeks are a really important part of this area. And I think that considering the creeks as part of the design have to come in much stronger than, oh, we will put a trail next to the creek. It has to be a stronger element. And it has to be to look at the riparian vegetation and not only as a transportation corridor. The creeks are not going to ever have the type of creeks that they have in Europe, so the rivers with a lot of water that you can have kayaking on there, but they're still important both for the spiritual and the sense of place and the beauty of the place. Other than that, I wanted to say that green roofs are becoming more and more evident as important to both people and wildlife. Birds and other creatures use them. There's more research showing that, so I would consider at least close to the creeks to have green roofs as part of the design and bird-safe design to protect the birds from colliding into glass buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Shani. Next is Jonica Clem, followed by Adna Levy.
I like Geneve. That was pretty good. So Janica Clem, lifelong resident and native of San Jose. And I wanted to say I find it really interesting that these problems that we're talking about have been decades in the making. Housing, a lot of the issues that we've been discussing have been decades in the making. And a corporation we've never looked to solve our societal problems before. I do understand that there is an opportunity, though. And so I appreciate what Google is doing. I'm actually very proud that they chose our city in the most transit-rich area to choose their next big campus. So thank you. I'm actually really looking forward to that because it's going to do two things for the city. One, it's going to deal with that jobs housing imbalance. We're going to get a lot of jobs coming into San Jose, which is something that the city desperately needs. The reason why our roads and stuff are so terrible is due directly to that jobs housing imbalance. We just don't have the funding. So while there is going to be community benefit coming from Google, I also want to make fact that what's actually going to be even more beneficial is the tax and revenue that's going to come in from this development. So the community benefit is important, but having this come in is going to do twofold for the city. It's going to deal with that jobs housing imbalance, and it's also really going to bring some desperately needed tax revenue into the city to help with the things that we've all been discussing today. So I am absolutely excited about Google coming into my hometown.
Thank you so much, Janica. Sorry again about the name mishap. Last two are Adna Levy and Mary Lee Balsley.
All right, that is somewhat close. Adina Levin, I'll start out making comments with Friends of Caltrain. We support sustainable transportation on the Peninsula Corridor from San Francisco through San Jose and a little bit beyond. I wanted to start by reinforcing something that several people said regarding the parking, which is that in the interest of sustainable transportation, manage parking for where the city wants to be rather than for where it has been in the past or is today. There were some numbers on early slides up at the beginning about the mix of development to date in the downtown Diridon area with 10,700 homes and 3.4 million square feet of office, which is maybe 17,000 jobs, so significant, jobs going ahead of housing. So that suggests a few different things. One that is potentially within the ability of San Jose to address, which is to have a policy to have housing in the transit shed, which means not only being in an urban village somewhere, but being in an urban village somewhere that you can get to some of these jobs within a nice, short transit or non-driving commute. That's something that San Jose can optimize its policies to achieve. But then overall, with San Jose historically being a bedroom community and wanting to catch up on homes, but I'm seeing a pattern starting here that I see working on the Peninsula Corridor with cities accepting a 10-to-1 or 5-to-1 jobs to housing balance continuing and ongoing, and that is causing catastrophic impact on a regional level. So, and so now speaking as an individual with various housing advocacy hats, hopefully there might be some things with the Regional CASA initiative, things with San Jose's legislative portfolio, some way of looking proactively at what to do about having more jobs and homes, because people need to live somewhere, and if that is not provided, then it's a game of musical chairs that poor people lose regardless of all the other policies.
Thank you very much, Adina. Last two, we have Mary Lee Balsley and Ishan Harrell.
Hello, Mary Lee Balsley. Thank you, volunteers. You're all very bright, very
invigorating to be here. I'm a Gardner resident. Thank you, Kevin. And I'm shocked that I was sitting here for hours before I heard a peep about small businesses. I am a business consultant and advocate, and my office is on, I've had 5 offices downtown. Right now I'm on Julian and Autumn Expressway. And have been there for 14 years. We are losing our space, of course, to Google coming in, as are many other companies, which are the lifeblood of San Jose in an area that's been there very long established, a lot of family-owned companies. They have now been selling out parcel by parcel. The last sliver has recently sold. So the monopoly game continues. And now what we're seeing is all different timelines. Some people are gone, they're disappearing, they're going to be disappearing. They've lost their employees, they've lost their space, their ability to sell their business, to pass it down to family members. All of that has been wiped out. I can tell you probably 30 businesses right now, all of which we all depend on, that have gone. Where have they gone? Some have been lost, and some have been lost forever. So I'm just here to represent those people that you will never see or hear about. In the meantime, the area is being constantly evacuated. We have a decline, a very rapid decline in the area. That would include garbage, homeless, vandalism, crime, everything. It's out of control. It's filthy. And it's very, very dangerous to be there evenings when I work, and we're all unable to hire anyone willing to come and work in that area. So I'm just here to say that it's already begun, and we're talking a lot about impact and displacement. It's in full tilt boogie right now. We're being displaced. We're disappearing. All the small businesses are looking for smaller spaces that are no longer affordable, can't afford to relocate, and are all struggling. None of this, we've all been through this before. I used to be the consultant for the Downtown Association and did the very first work on retail retention and recruitment. There has been no proactive forethought to how to preserve these businesses or relocate them and preserve the jobs we need in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Last up is Ishan.
I'm from Oakland, California. My mother passed away 13 years ago, and I came to this beautiful city. I just want to let you know that there's been some wonderful, I'm just like surrounded by brilliance, and not just in the city, the Bay Area, period, from the East Bay to the South Bay. We literally created the computer chip. There was no religion, no school of thought, no belief system involved in that idea. Across that table, every nationality, literally, of every origin had a part in putting that together. The computer chip in itself. San Jose is the very heart of Silicon Valley. I think the last piece of paper that was signed that invented the computer chip was 1947, somewhere along the lines, just a piece of paper, and the ideas came together, and it was signed at San Jose State. Across that very table, we connected the world internationally, all over the world, instantaneously, through brilliance, ideas, research, loss, failures, losses. People have lost their lives literally in one general aspect or another. Across that table, we connected everybody instantaneously. Across that very same table, we can correct everything else going on around us. This is my belief. I'm an addict. I'm 32 years of addiction. I am also a father. I'm a son, and I am many other things. Don't you know who I think I am? Let me tell it. But at the same time, I'm surrounded by inspiration. These inspirations have also got me back to my children. They got me clean and sober. As many times as I've fallen, I've gotten up. I fall down, I get up. Okay, and please forgive me for expressing this. This is the last moment that I probably ever get an opportunity to express something, and I just happenstance coming through here, getting ready for another venue. I produce music, I sing, write, and my daughter and my son, they do the same. Both my son and my daughter, they work for Amazon. My daughter drives, my son packages. He's 19, she's 23, and I was nowhere around messing their lives up. But I was in preparation to get back to them and have the right conversations with my daughter and my son, being inspired by what I've seen around here. Having lost my mother and going through that emotional roller coaster, I've come to believe that there are families that have literally fed me when I didn't know I was hungry, and they looked out for me and didn't know me. So what I'm basically saying is, in a nutshell, basically what I'm saying is there are mom and pop stores that have literally given their lives and sacrifices and all the challenges and everything of 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years raising kids, grandkids, and great-grandchildren. in this very community. Why would Google come, not to say anything negative about what it is that's going on as far as the development and everything, and I'm looking at it not just in the Bay Area or San Jose. I'm just going to basically what I'm asking is this: why not incorporate the community in the idea instead of forcing them out and raising the prices of things that they've literally been spending their pennies on to build? And I'm pretty sure Google has benefited somewhere along the lines of all the customers that are now going to be left, you know, without these attachments to these families and these communities and these companies and these stores and whatever it is. Why not incorporate them in the idea?
Okay,
as in
thank you, sir.
attach the idea to the community. Don't force them out of the idea, as in having benefited from the idea that they built from day one.
Thank you.
God bless you.
All right, folks, I'm going to sit too because I'm tired like you. Just a few things, and I'll get you out of here. I do think as we move forward with the next two meetings, I do apologize for the lateness of the hour. I think, you know, we're going to look at how we manage the agenda and time a little bit better so we don't put you guys through this 3.5 hours on a meeting, and something of this significance and depth of policy is tough for you guys and tough for the community. Second follow-up item, I am going to ask Lori, just a show of hands, some of you did want to discuss some of the kind of outreach methods and strategies and possibly some assistance with us trying to promote the next few meetings. So if you guys can at least just touch base with Lori on the way out, we'd like to take you guys up on that to make sure that the next 3 forums and the online stuff we're doing is be able to be impactful as possible. I get that, you know, there's many of us around the table here that do policy making for a living. You know, many of us know that that can be a frustrating process. Met with my team this morning talking about a variety of policy items we're going to be working with, and we were all frustrated with each other at the end of that meeting. So as frustrating as this was for some of you, and you know, I talked to you off to the side, it was a little frustrating for us as well, and I think that's a good thing because it means the next meeting and the meeting after that, as we get forward to the report, some of this is fleshed out and refined. So a lot of this was an attempt to, as Kim mentioned with the Google MOU, it's going to be high levels, and we've done really good work on some of those groups with the solutions, a lot of creativity, a lot of agreement, some disagreement that we needed to flesh out. But having those desired outcomes in that conversation tonight, so we have something more high level, is really important for us, and it's going to be important for the group as we move forward with these particular items. So get that it was frustrating. I'm going to actually ask if any of you that said you wanted to send in a letter for more comment, please do that so the group is aware of kind of what you want to do. But I'm actually going to ask, you know, within the next 7 days that Lori, Matt, and Dave reach out to you as well and just have more of a conversation about where we actually missed the mark, because there wasn't an intent to miss the mark. It was an attempt to try and bring all solutions together into one thing that, you know, we'd have some agreement on. But again, it's a process, as the policy process is. So with that, we are adjourned, and I will see you on September 27th, if not in the meantime.